Got to sit back and pinch yourself. And wow, did this really happen? We've been together for 20 years and we're making a living off of, you know, playing some crazy, obnoxious music.
20 years later, 54 countries later, 12, 14 albums, a million albums later, here we are.
Still stuck to our guns, still did it. I think that's why we're where we are today.
Well, there's nothing like stepping on stage and just hearing the crowd. There's no feeling like that in the world.
This is what I wanted to be my career. I took a shot and hit the target.
Some of the fondest memories of my life being with that band, for sure.
We got really lucky and we're really happy about it and we're really grateful to our fans, you know. I can't believe it. I can't believe we made it.
We're gonna start back to way back when.
Oh, here we go. This is like a therapy session or something to regress to childhood memories.
I've known Barnes probably longer than anybody in the music business in any regard from this point.
Chris Barnes lived just across the street from us, or the next street over.
We pretty much grew up a big portion of our lives together.
He was one of my best friends. I mean, I've known him, you know, he said since 7th grade.
We were really like brothers almost at a certain point in time in our families. You know, I was real close to his mom and dad.
Chris came over, slept at our house most weekends. Paulie would go to his house.
And just jam out whatever, Metallica, Exciter, anything totally heavy.
Geez, I think they did some air band stuff, if I remember.
Just air banding the songs and stuff.
You get into music at an early age, you know, it becomes your life, and then obviously you want to create your own.
And all of a sudden we were just like, we're pretty good at faking it. We might as well just try it for real.
But it was me, Chris Barnes, and a good friend of mine, Rich Ziegler. We all hung out, went to school together, and I remember the day when we said, you know what, let's start a band.
Me and Paul and Chris were sitting in my basement in my parents' house.
They were like, you know, what are we each gonna play? And Paul was like, well, I know how to play drums.
My cousin, you know, is a drummer. My uncle's a drummer. I dabbled a little, and I wanted to play the drums, so I'm gonna buy a drum set.
And he's like, oh, you guys should get instruments too, and we'll start a band.
And I was like, well, I want to play bass.
And I wasn't gonna sing because I didn't want to, so I said, I'll do bass.
So I was kind of like bummed out because I wanted to play bass.
And Barnes ended up being a singer.
That was the real essence of the beginning of how I became a singer.
We had the name, we had song titles and everything like that, but we started the band before any of us even knew how to play and pick up a pick or an instrument.
Us three sort of formed this band that's not really a band because we don't have a guitar player.
And at that point, you know, we knew Bob from school.
We met Bob Rousset. He was a year older than us. He was a senior at the time.
It was 1985. We got Bob in the band, so we had the full band.
We were practicing at my house.
Paul was kind of proactive at getting us settled in. They had a finished basement.
They played a little bit in our house, maybe a month or so, 2 at most.
I sang out of Rich's bass amp out of another channel as a PA while he was playing.
When they did play, the neighbors talked about the ground shaking and whatnot.
Kind of learning our chops from the stuff we liked listening to.
We were a cover band, you know, we were still learning.
If I'm not mistaken, our first song that we attempted was a Pink Floyd song. That ended real quick.
The very first song we did learn was Dethroned Emperor by Celtic Frost.
And Exciter, pounding metal.
Balls to the wall, except because they were easier to play. We weren't stepping right into trying to play Slayer. We couldn't do it.
Nobody took lessons. Everybody just learned by ear. And, you know, I'll be honest with you, I've got a very first tape of the Tyrant Sin days, and man, they sucked. They absolutely sucked.
What's with the fucking feedback back there, man?
He did some gigs playing cover tunes, and then Chris ended up quitting the band.
Basically left the band and decided to go ahead and venture out and jam with some other people, and ended up with a band called Leviathan.
And they were way ahead of us in the scheme of, well, they're doing originals, you know, kind of a thing. We weren't doing originals yet. We weren't good enough.
Leviathan was really the first local original underground metal band.
All the guys in Buffalo were looking up to Leviathan. They were like, wow, they were Slayer to everybody. That's how good they were.
When I did the Leviathan demo, Legions of the Undead, with a guy named Dennis Fura up in Niagara Falls.
The demos that we were making sounded
good enough that other people would start coming into the studio to do some work with me.
Yeah, we want to work with Dennis. We want to come here. We want a demo that sounds as good as that. I love that demo. I love those songs.
We didn't have a singer yet.
We were just like, you know what? Let's just go into the studio. Let's record the songs. And Rich sang 2 of the songs, and I sang 2 of the songs.
Oh man, he's doing some like real high stuff. It's classic. I listen to it still, like on a steady basis.
I sound like a complete and utter idiot on these songs. I mean, when I listen back, I'm like, oh my gosh. Rich actually did a pretty good job, you know, at singing his 2 songs. He had like a lower voice.
Going home, stop the lights, it's completely horrible, and it sucks. The second demo, we got Dennis into the band. We did our first real shows as a band, playing completely original songs then, with him as a singer.
We met Beyond Death at one of our shows. I think it was Jack. He gave me a matchbook with his name on it and his phone number, and it said that I'm in this band called Beyond Death.
Beyond Death is a band that me and Jack and Darren Pfeiffer formed out in Akron.
We would just get together and listen to Metal Church records and listen to Testament records and Metallica, and we talked about starting this band.
I think we were at Darren Pfeiffer's house, and we go in his bedroom. He's got a drum kit. Pulls the blanket off, like, check this out, and he plays like some Motley Crue beats. I'm like, holy shit, this guy's awesome.
Jack brought his amp, and his PA, he had a little PA, and Alex brought his little bass rig, and we would jam on songs.
We did 1 studio demo, and then we had a couple of live demos.
First Beyond Death demo was a brutal experience. We went to a studio, we didn't know what we were doing. The guy recording didn't know what he was doing, and we kind of were like, who's gonna sing? And Alex was like, I guess I'll do it.
Oh, I used to sing. You didn't know that. That's what you're laughing about, right? Yeah, I used to sing with Beyond Death.
Alex, I thought, had a really awesome vocal.
It was crazy. He had a really good voice.
3 guys just writing these songs that we thought were the best songs in the world, because we actually were able to start and finish the song. And it was heavy, it was fast, it was thrashy, and there was a solo in one of them. We were so stoked.
We did 1 show at the Metal Shop as a 3-piece, and at that show, Tyrant Sin headlined, and Rob Barrett's band, Dark Deception, opened.
Dark Deception were amazing. They were very, very talented musicians. I mean, Bob, whatever you want to call him.
That's what I was, Bob. I wasn't Rob yet.
It's Rob now, yeah. He was an amazing, very, very skilled guitar player. And he played with a drummer named Bob Delmonte.
Whenever somebody would call, hey, Bob, both of us would look. So I was getting fed up with it. I was like, all right, my name's Rob now, okay?
We realized when we played with Dark Deception and Tyrant Sin that these other bands were a lot better than us.
We looked up to them because they were a lot more polished of a metal band than we were. They were a lot more brutal of a metal band than we were.
And we also wanted to get a second guitar player, so I called Rob Barrett to see if he could give me any tips about who would be somebody good, you know, if he knew anybody around Buffalo. He said, yeah, there's this guy Frank Lombardi, he's awesome. He's got a room at this place called Absolute Storage where he just jams by himself. You know, he's looking to put a band together. And he said, maybe you guys should go get together with him.
And we were kind of in the process of writing songs. We weren't very good at it. And, you know, Frank had these great songs, and we thought they were amazing.
We're in if he wants to join.
We joined his songs with our songs, and then we started writing more songs, and Beyond Death started to make a little bit of a buzz in Buffalo. Once we got Frank in the band, he was singing.
Frank was the best in Beyond Death for the singing. He really had a great voice.
I liked Beyond Death. I thought they had the meanest crunch out there.
We looked at Beyond Death, and it's like, we felt they were a lot tighter than us.
Beyond Death was more of an SOD, early death metal sound, like Blood Feast or something.
We were practicing in Akron in Darren's basement for a long time, and that wasn't really cutting it. So we moved all our gear into Absolute Storage here Beyond Death practiced here.
Basically, everyone was at that absolute storage. We'd all come out into the hall or go see one of the other bands jam.
Sometimes Paul and Bob Russe would come over to our room and jam a little bit. Sometimes I always used to go over to their room and watch them. He was in Leviathan. And
That's you're down the hall from me.
yeah, and any
Next to
chance
the
that I
bathroom.
got, I would like try and go in there and watch them because they were like the best band in the scene at the time.
Leviathan were only short-lived. They did one demo with you. They only played 2 shows live in Buffalo. They ended up breaking up, and then Barnes ended up coming back into Tyrant Sin.
Paul just came to me and he said, you know, Chris has been our buddy and stuff, and we'd want to have him come back.
They were like, yeah, let's do it. So I kind of came back into it.
It wasn't like, F you, get the hell out of here. It was they did it nice. At the time, I was like, fuck you, but it's like, if you look at it now, it's like, whatever.
Messed around, did a demo with them called Mutant Supremacy.
And shortly after that, I quit. And that was pretty much the end of Tyrant Sin.
What the fuck?
Towards the end, me and Jack, we were leaning a lot more towards just straightforward death metal, like Sodom and Creator, Possessed, and Death, those kind of bands. Darren and Frank were going a little bit more hardcore crossover, and so we split up.
Alex called me on the phone and said, yeah, Beyond Death is all but done.
We really were not mad at each other or anything when the band broke up. It just seemed like it was time to do something different.
When Tyrant Sin and Beyond Death broke up, it was just like, keep going somehow, put forces together.
Me and Jack were like, yeah, let's call Bob and see what those guys are doing.
It was just like, hey, Bob, let's get together, jam, see what happens.
They were like, yeah, you guys could get in. This is perfect, so it'll be the 5 of us. So we're like, okay, let's make the band.
I was really psyched when that all came together.
That relationship, that marriage kind of happened, pretty quick in the formation of the band.
It seemed like it would be inevitable.
We always really loved Tyrant Sin's music, so the idea of jamming with those guys was something that me and Jack were very enthusiastic about.
It was that excitement, I think, of 2 entities coming together, forming one different entity that's a whole new ballgame. We all thought we had something pretty special right off the bat. The songs that we wrote pretty quick.
By the time I hooked up with Paul, Chris, and Bob, they had kind of that riff.
Basically, this is where me and Russe started out jamming Skull Full of Maggots down here in my parents' basement. I set up my drum set, which would have probably been somewhere right around here, where we're standing sort of here.
After that, they went to a practice room.
We went back to this place. It's where our old bands had practiced, and we really liked this place a lot.
Me and Alex would drive 45 minutes, because we lived out in the country, and the band practiced in Buffalo.
We practiced, 5 days a week, sometimes 6, I think, but always Monday through Friday.
We just lived up there, basically.
I wasn't thinking about school or any of the part-time jobs I had. I was thinking about the band.
I would just take my boombox up to the rehearsal space, and they'd play the song that kind of was worked out the day before or whatever, and just take the tape home and write lyrics to it.
Within a couple weeks, I think we'd come up with the name for the band.
The name is fucking awesome. It's just Cannibal Corpse.
Cannibal Corpse. I was like, wow, what a cool ring.
Instead of saying hello for like a year, we just like Cannibal Corpse. It's such a
we still do that.
It rolls off your tongue kind of weird. Cannibal Corpse, Cannibal Corpse.
And it seemed like it fit the lyrical direction we decided we wanted to go in.
Genius, whoever came up with the name of the band, genius.
I came up with the name. I just thought it sounded cool.
I just remember him saying, Cannibal Corpse. And all of us going like, that's it.
Here's a good question, though. What is a cannibal corpse?
Is it a cannibal that's a corpse?
You kind of analyze the word, and you're like, okay, that's not a good thing, is it?
I immediately thought of, George Romero or some Night of the Living Dead.
Sometimes it's just Cannibal Corpse. It's like eating a corpse.
What it really is an undead zombie that's going to eat you. We did our first demo a couple months later. As soon as we had enough songs to do a demo, we had 5 good songs and a couple ones that we didn't really like too much.
It's a pretty crude snapshot of what the main idea behind the concept lyrically and what we wanted to visually put across in the aggressive nature of the music.
We did that at Border City Recording with Dennis Fura.
It was kind of a challenge for me, I remembered. I'm going, wow, you know, okay, let me see what I can do with this. I want to hear the guitars. I want to hear the vocals. I want to hear the bass. Kick drums, let's make sure we hear the kicks, you know, and because it's such a wall of sound. I would hear the same stories over and over. We went to such and such studio and they couldn't care less. You know, they just wanted to get us out. As soon as they heard our music, it was like, okay, well, these guys, blah, 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 let's just get this done and get them out of here.
You cared about it. You wanted to do the best, you know, that you could do and make us happy.
I just felt for them too, you know, it's like they've got this dream and, you know, they're just working so hard to come up with, you know, like $50, $60, $100 to come in and do a session.
We were young kids and we didn't have that kind of money to go into the studio.
Oh, I charged those guys a couple million for their demo. I knew they were
still paying them off, you know? I mean,
the money wasn't that big of a deal for me, but it was just making sure they got the product that they wanted.
Demo stuff back then was not like demo stuff today. It wasn't like overproduced.
That shit was low tech, baby. That was like a cassette with a red piece of construction paper with the word Cannibal Corpse on it.
Yep.
And that was it. It was like, you could see where they typed everything out by hand.
We made 100 with white, and then we made another 100 with red covers.
There wasn't many of those sold, though, those demos.
So if you got one, that's one of 200.
One of the best things about it is I could actually read their logo.
There's a lot of stuff that you can't read.
Chris Barnes did the original Cannibal Corpse logo.
Dripping blood, and it was a mess, and it kind of expressed what the main thought of the band was.
Their logo was definitely one.
Yeah,
It's
and
like you could tell by looking at the logo what they were about.
Over the top, blood and zombies.
Home of the Hits was the first record store that sold our demo.
It was a staple in Buffalo to get your metal. Everybody and anybody would go there.
You'd run into a lot of people that lived in different neighborhoods going there to go buy metal.
So many of the death metal records that I own, I bought here. This was the only place to get it in town.
I think they just closed like the past couple of years. They just shut down.
It's changing times, you know. People are not able to sell copies of music the way they used to be able to.
You used to go to the record store and hang out and listen to new stuff, and now people are doing it alone on their computers and on their laptops or whatever.
I think I tape traded the first Cannibal record, and then I think after that we had CDs, and at the time, blank CDs were kind of costly. They weren't like 10 cents like they are now. So people still kind of tape traded.
You know, just sending out tapes to everybody. We go to the post office with just like bags and bags filled with, you know, cassette tapes.
Back then, it was cool to shove a tape in each other's pockets and, you know, check this shit out.
People would send out their handwritten or typed lists of the tapes they'd have, and you say, okay, I don't have that, I'll trade you this for that, and just getting worse and worse generation copies and just the worst recordings and just listening to them and still loving them.
To all the young kids who are watching this, we had to work for our music back then. You actually had to write to the bands, you wait for a response, you'd order the demo, you get the demo, and then you'd listen to it, and if it was great, you'd order a shirt and you'd support the band.
I wrote him a letter when I was like 14, you know, like fucking retarded.
Cannibal had the Maggot Colony fan club, and I wrote to him.
I love you guys so much. You should write a song about like water zombies or some shit.
Like water zombies. But they actually responded and sent me a sticker, and Paul actually wrote, "Welcome to the Maggot Colony."
That's funny that Woody got one of those.
Back in the day, you know, we were all, of course, more gung-ho, and everybody's writing people back.
Yeah, they sent me a bunch of stickers and shit. And I was like, holy fuck.
Somewhere right around here, I think just right around the corner on Forest, there was a copy place. And so we printed it out, put it like on a piece of paper 12 times, and then we went over there and ran off copies on sticker paper, like really bright green, bright orange. And then we'd snip them up and send them to people.
Prior to kids being able to like email their friends about bands, it was just literally about a buzz that would happen in cities. We all kind of worked to build this scene together.
They had a lot of support from their friends here because you had like two guys that were doing local radio. You had
You know, you had Psycho, you had Venom.
I ran, it was Psycho's Metal Mayhem on WBNY. I did the metal show 10 till 2 every Tuesday night.
WBNY was the college radio station at Buffalo State College.
What I wanted to do was to play the heaviest, most brutal metal.
And that is definitely the first radio station that ever played Cannibal Corpse.
Well, I played them a lot because we were friends. But they're a great band. I mean, they were awesome.
And he did a great job with the metal show. He really helped the local scene a lot.
He always made sure that he would play at least 2 or 3 local bands every hour.
I was all about the local bands, which is where I became friends with those guys. If there was a band that I loved and they were playing around, I'd bring them up to the show. And
we'd go down there and, you know, do interviews on the air and, you know, get to play songs or whatnot.
He used to promote all the shows that would be coming up on the radio.
People would tune into the station religiously to hear what Psycho had to say.
Kids freaked over Cannibal because it was, I mean, it was their local band doing this stuff.
By the time we got Cannibal going, there was like a buzz for that. So the first show, we got on a bill with Dark Angel.
I was on tour with Dark Angel. We were on our Leave Scars tour, and a bunch of dudes came up to us at our show in Buffalo and said, hey, we're in a band called Cannibal Corpse, and we're opening your show tonight. And we're like, wow, cool. They're like, oh, we love your band and all that sort of stuff. And like, wow, this is your very first show. Cool.
You know, new band back in the day, playing our very first show, you know, and opening for one of our favorite bands.
Dark Angel at the time was huge. And to have a band that huge showing up, playing the River Rock.
That made no sense whatsoever.
There's like really no scene yet in Buffalo as far as like the heavier stuff went.
The promoter, Artie Kwitchkoff, he started bringing national death metal and thrash metal bands to Buffalo, and he would put Cannibal on the bill or some of the other bands, and that really pumps up the local scene.
At the time back then, the beauty of it was that you booked the band and you booked the headliner, and you could actually put local bands on a bill, which, you know, today it's almost impossible because every band is touring with 4 other bands.
We got the gig with a couple other local bands from Buffalo, a band called Baphomet, a band called Attack.
We really went all out to promote that Dark Angel show.
We do up the posters in all the fun colors. And you know, and go attack the streets of Buffalo.
He gave us, Baphomet and Attack, each like 2,000 flyers for that show, and we went to see Metallica in Queensryche. That was a week and a half before at the Odd, and we handed out all these flyers.
The flyers were on everybody's car after the show, so you went outside and there was flyers everywhere.
We flyered the entire upstate area.
So it was a total of like 8,000 flyers already made for that show.
I'm talking Metallica shows in Rochester, Syracuse, Buffalo. We were all over the place.
I mean, I tortured those guys to, like, you know, to get out there and promote. But it worked in such a huge way.
Before the show started, there'd be lines around the whole bar. That was the best part. It's just everybody waiting to come in.
Into a little tiny club. And we sold it out and had to turn away a lot of people.
It was packed to the gills.
Listen, I got a couple questions for you. Anyone out there remember Leviathan? Yeah! Cool. How about Tyrant Sin? How about Beyond Death? You know what happens when you combine the best of each? That's right! Cannibal Corpse! Let's go!
You just felt your heart doing this the entire time, and we were all like high school kids, so I'm like, whoa! Jesus Christ!
It was just the perfect first show.
And it started here, man. This is where it started, right over there.
Okay, we just put out a new demo like last week. You might have heard it on BNY. This is a song off of it. This is entitled, The Undead Will Feast.
This was the pit right here. So when you were here, this is the pit. And when you jump here, this whole place feels like it's gonna fall over. Imagine 100, 300 kids in this area right here going crazy.
Everybody's going off, slamming and diving.
You grab the kid next to you, just,
Yeah, you couldn't help it. It got into your blood. You just couldn't help it.
There's so much power. Just people were just pounding on each other. It was great, man.
It was non-stop from the very first song to the end of the show.
For a band doing their first show, yeah, I was really happy with it.
Yeah, that was really cool, and we just became pals, and they were a bunch of cute little kids.
It was real apparent after that show that Cannibal was the band that was going to kind of eclipse everybody else.
And that like woke up the town. From there on in, man, the scene only got stronger and stronger.
Those guys were doing something which had never really been seen around here, so all of us were like, whoa.
Come on, let's fucking see you!
It was clearly head and shoulders above Beyond Death and much, much better than Tyrant Sin. And it was a total 180 direction. It was like as brutal and fast and as gnarly and as aggressive as it can get.
And they were getting away with it. Like, we were all thinking it, but no one had the balls to do it. And these guys had the balls to do it. We were like, yes, those guys right there.
You go to see them, and there'd be kids everywhere. The place would be packed, and it was cool because it's like, wow, this really is something.
Buffalo completely embraced Cannibal Corpse. The newspaper always had something about Cannibal Corpse in it.
We really made the scene such a big deal in Buffalo that the Buffalo News wrote about it. I'm sure most of the people in Western New York, when they read this, were probably scared for their children. That's a whole lot of hair in that picture.
All of a sudden, you got an army of long-haired kids showing up in leather jackets and jean vests with, you know, patches all over them, and the band starts playing. You see hair windmills and people just slamming in circles. The older people are looking at this going, what the hell is this?
I got a little crap from some people in the city and things happen, but it doesn't affect me because they couldn't stop it.
This is from '89. This is at the River Rock, this shot, because I can see the owner in the background at the soundboard. John let us go in and go do all these shows. Didn't freak out and didn't throw us out, and he got a kick out of it.
There was all these bands, didn't have no place to play. And you know when you're in a band, you got no place to play? You kind of do it for a while, then you piddle out and stop doing it. There's no motivation. But if you're doing it in front of people and you get the feel and you love it, that's what causes it to go. So, you know, I helped.
He didn't really care if we were good or not. He just wanted to, like, get the scene going.
And we got to play some big shows with Cannibal right off the bat, thanks to Artie and Brian and you know, bringing us in here.
Well, that was huge, having a guy, you know, like John there helping the scene out.
Without him opening up the gate to his club and letting people come in and use his soundboard and his PA, metal wouldn't have flourished in the city of Buffalo back then.
This one is Enter at Your Own Risk.
We went from no one even knowing where Buffalo was to people were dying to come play there because of the scene we had built up there.
Watching it grow was really cool.
We went from a small club that held 400 people to a big club that held 2,000 people.
It seemed like we were playing a show then almost every other month or every couple of weeks with a national act.
Here's a classic. Creator with Cannibal and Corner.
We opened for Blood Feast. We opened for The Accused. We opened for Death.
I watched that show and stood back and went,
Yeah, I think there was actually
shit,
like...
what the fuck is going
there was
on
probably
here?
like 1,000 people.
Yeah, it was
right?
like sold out, 1,200 people.
All the Skyroom shows were great. That's when they really started taking off. I mean, the place would always be packed whenever they played there.
When we first played here, it was like, wow, we're playing the Sky Room. It was such a big deal because it was a big staple in the music scene for Buffalo.
It was actually the real club, the real concert experience.
Within a year of them starting to really play shows, they had opened the floodgates.
It was really becoming explosive. It was a real micro universe in Buffalo, New York.
There was a lot of bands, you know, that were around, a lot of local bands. I mean, and a lot of good local bands.
Mayhemesis.
Terminal Grace. A couple of those guys went on to Green Jello, Green Jelly.
Attack.
Baphomet.
Humongous.
Zero Tolerance.
Killing Spree.
Malevolent Creation was a really great metal band that came out of Buffalo.
Cannibal Corpse and Malevolent would do shows together all the time.
A lot of diehard local fans that were always there.
They used to do whatever they had to do to help the band out, you know, be it passing out flyers, calling people, telling them about shows.
We heard they were playing out of town. It was like, oh, road trip, let's go. And you'd have guys packing into vans and like bumming rides off of people like, dude, what do I got to do to catch a ride with you to Pennsylvania? Or like, dude, they're going to upstate New York, man. What are we doing?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of people that followed us around.
Everyone just became, you know, like a close community of friends. We all knew each other. We all hung out together.
It was almost a cliche. It was like bonded in metal.
You'd call people up, hey, dude, what are you doing? Oh, we're going to go see Cannibal and then hang out at Alex's house afterwards. All right, cool, let's go.
This is one of the apartments I lived in when I was going to Buff State College, and that was right when Cannibal was first getting going. Me, Mark, Psycho Abramson, and our buddy Joe Agan. The three of us shared this house.
It was the metal house of Buffalo.
A lot of times the other guys in the band would come over to party.
Yeah, I do remember that stinking hole in the wall.
You see now it says no trespassing, bank-owned properties.
It was just wretched, man. I mean, it was a horrible place, man.
So much shit's boarded up around here. It's kind of depressing.
It should have been boarded up then.
We had much, oh my God. I mean,
a lot of wild, crazy fucking nights.
People falling out the windows kind of parties.
It's like Animal House, but metal. The other guys in Cannibal all lived a little farther out, and they, you know, they had cars and stuff. I was the one who was kind of all over the place.
We would all fight as hard as we could to not do dishes. So, I mean, it was a cockroach-infested, horrible nightmare place.
I'd be sleeping in late, and the other guys were a lot more responsible.
Barnes was working at a store in Buffalo called Cabbages. It was a record store.
Became really good friends with a guy named John Grandoni.
John was pretty instrumental in helping those guys out early on.
He was like my guru, you know. Basically, I learned a lot about the record industry from him.
John was aware of the demand through kids coming into Cabbages looking for the Cannibal Corpse stuff.
He was good friends with Mike Faley at Metal Blade.
Chris was like, hey man, this guy wants to help us and he's got a couple connections. He can send the demos out to a couple people.
It ended up getting on Mike's desk.
Metal Blade's vice president, Mike Faley, was from Buffalo, so kind of an in there to not knock our demo off the desk.
There were videos that were out there. There were people I could call in Buffalo that would tell me about the band live and everything else, so we could get a pretty good idea of what the band was about.
I was managing the Goo Goo Dolls who were on Metal Blade, so Mike called me and said, you know, can you tell me about this band Cannibal Corpse? And it was like, well, they're it.
The first thing I remember about their tape, before I even listened to it, was they had a song called A Skull Full of Maggots.
They saw that title. It was like, Skull Full of Maggots, this is awesome.
And initially I was like, I really have to sign this band just based on the song title itself.
That song title really kind of dug into people's memory.
We liked the tape, and we decided, you know what, we're going to put this band out.
Called them up and said, hey, we want to sign you.
I believe it was July of '89, I got a record contract sent to my house.
I was like, you're kidding. You gotta be kidding me. Are you serious? He's like, I'm serious.
So like Metal Blade, Established, Armored Saint, Flotsam and Jetsam, Lizzie Borden, Slayer. You know, a good track record.
90% of the things that I would find in a record store, I'd be looking at it, and I'd turn it over, oh, it's on Metal Blade. Okay, that's kick-ass. It's got Brian Slagle's name on it. That guy is awesome. It was just like kind of a surreal thing to get this record contract from someone that I really admired.
And I was kind of in a state of disbelief. I was like, I can't believe a band that we're in, we got signed. We haven't even been a band for a year.
It hit us in the head, you know, like what the hell what are you talking about? We can sign a Metal Blade? I mean, are you, what?
So we're like, record contract, we're in.
That was that. It was pretty simple.
People in Buffalo were really excited for them. It's almost like the fans of Beyond Death and the fans of Tyrant Sin and the fans of metal in Buffalo in general felt that they had got signed and that they were successful.
It definitely was inspiring, especially for an area where you think the world's not watching, and a band like Corpse can get signed.
Everybody that hung out in the scene in Buffalo back then, it was all who's going to get signed first.
Anybody who's ever picked up a guitar or picked up a drumstick, that's your dream, is to get signed and to be able to play music for your life.
Labels weren't signing death metal, you know, at that time. It was real new.
It was our first death metal band. We had not signed a death metal band up to that point.
There was discussion at the time, why did Slagle sign these guys? Because Metal Blade wasn't even a death metal label.
People kind of was like, oh, what are you signing that band for? And, you know, are they real?
They didn't see what we had seen in the band.
Critics and reviewers and business people, yeah, they thought they were a joke. But, you know, as happens time and time again in the music world, people spoke.
Fans get it before industry people get it a lot of times.
We were doing this really extreme music and there wasn't a lot of love for it. But there was an underground, and that underground was brewing throughout the 80s.
Certainly 88, 89 is when what I would call like the first real wave of American death metal being known as death metal happened.
You had Autopsy from the West Coast, you had bands like Us and Suffocation and Incantation up in the north, and then Tampa kind of had its scene.
You had Eulogy, you had Monstrosity, Deicide, Solstice, Cynic from down south.
Down there, it was like kind of like Wild West of metal.
A ton of killer bands started coming out of Florida and especially Tampa.
Oh, it was a scene back in 84, 85 with Sabotage. That kind of carried over to like the death metal thing.
I think if you ask any of the kids here, they all grew up on Sabotage.
Sabotage is the band that made a music scene in Tampa and Central Florida. It was Sabotage. And they're like the gods and the godfathers, and we all worship John Oliva and Chris, and they're the band that put Florida on the map.
Atheist had a record recorded. It wasn't out yet. Morbid Angel had recorded an album even though it wasn't released. Obituary's done a record for Roadrunner. Slowly We Rot. Death Leprosy had already been out for a while. So those were like the first albums to really start getting national exposure.
When you're in a band and you like the way a band sounds, you go right to the production line and you find who produced this. Let's use that guy.
Not only was it created in Tampa, but it was actually created at Morrisound Studios in Tampa.
Morrisound was a large format professional major recording studio in Tampa that at the time really are kind of the people that sort of figured out what to do with this type of music.
Nobody gave a shit about the death metal bands and their sounds, and they sounded like they were in a fucking blender.
Studios had no idea how to handle a kick drum like that, how to handle those vocals or that guitar sound. Everything would always come out sounding like mud.
It's easy to make a record, like when you listen to a pop record, sound good. It's got big wide open spaces and there's places to put keyboards or backing vocals and nice big holes everywhere. It's hard when everything is 200 miles an hour. There's double bass, there's cymbals, there's fast riffs, there's bass, and everybody wants their part prominent and heard.
Scott was probably the first highly trained technician who was a qualified engineer who made this music, you know, something you could listen to and not completely cringe.
Actually, Scott came in to do Slowly to Rot by accident. He was actually the engineer on the mix, and the producer was actually Rick Miller. I think someone was sick in his family, so he had to go to California or something. And we said, "Scott, you want to try it?" And he was like, "Yeah." And he started holding the controls, and that's how he got involved with us.
Everybody heard Slowly to Rot and was like hooked on that. They wanted that heavy, in-your-face kind of vibe.
Back then, Scott Burns, he was just the guy. Like, you know, there wasn't really any other guys even like talked about. It was just like Scott Burns. Oh, of course we're going to Scott Burns.
Scott was the man that kind of put Morrisound on the death metal map.
A lot of amazing albums that Scott didn't even do, like a lot of albums that Jim Morris did that came out of there, and Tom Morris as well, that came out of there that were amazing albums.
Jim and Tom were really ahead of the scene with like drum triggering and replacements.
Now, double bass drumming is a huge part of death metal music, and Morrisound was the first studio in America, in my opinion, that really knew how to handle that kind of drumming.
That's really how Morrisound kind of contributed to this rising scene down here.
It was the magic blessing that you received, you know, like you gotta go through the death metal gates at Morrisound to like get your death metal wings or something, you know?
The Florida bands really made Morrisound big. Those bands and Sepultura from Brazil, they were like the one exception of as far as the really early Morrisound stuff.
Well, he finished the Slowly album and then he did the Sepultura record.
Really?
Yeah. I think they heard some of the demo tapes and the pre-production of what we did. And they were like, "No, we want that guy."
Basically, it came down to they had nobody that wanted to go to Brazil over Christmas, and everyone thought Sepultura sucked, all the big producers. So Roadrunner was left with nobody, and they said, "Well, we know Scott, and he's worked on some stuff for us, and why not go down there?" So I was in college, and I was like, "Hell, what the hell?" I like the music. I've never been to Brazil, and sure, sounds like fun. So we went down there, and I guess kind of that took off.
After we heard Beneath the Remains from Sepultura, I don't think there was any doubt that we were going to come here to Morrisound.
We're like, hey, let's record with Scott Burns. He did Sepultura.
Kind of called information, looked for Morrisound, and then was like, is Scott Burns there?
I didn't really do any filtering on it. If you called me up and said you wanted to come down, I was like, sure, come on down.
We prepared ourselves to make the long road trip in the dead of winter.
We packed up Jack's van.
Jack's piece of shit white Chevy van.
We packed up my pickup truck.
Drove all the way down to Florida.
Where the hell are we? We're in South Carolina.
It's so classic. The whole trip was a magical journey of 5 crazy youths.
Pumping gas. None of us have been too many places at this point, so this was a big thing for us.
for a bunch of young kids to venture 1,200 miles away from home.
To leave Buffalo, to come down to record our first CD.
Look at all these peacocks. These are all corpse peacocks.
They're prepared for the arrival of the corpse. Look at the tail on that peacock, man. That's
Where?
like the king peacock, this blue
one?
one.
Whoa,
There's like
look at that tail.
800 peacocks at our door.
We're in Tampa, it's nice weather.
Man, I'm hot. A, it's a Florida vacation, and B, we're ready to go, we're ready to record, we've got everything written.
God, I got such good memories about this place. When we first came down, you know, and you walk in the door, they used to have the album covers of Beneath the Remains, Altars of Madness. You know, some of the great records that they did here were up on the wall.
And the Beatles were here once.
Yes, they recorded
They
here.
recorded here.
The 12 albums in 1 week got burned and all.
I remember going, yes, Morrisound. Like, wow, look at this is Morrisound.
I was like, man, I can't believe we're really here.
To see a real studio, the way the A room is set up in Morrisound, it's still that way. Huge drum room, we're just freaking out.
This is the drum kit. There's Paul's feet. They're pounding away like never before. No, there's Jack. There's not Paul.
Here we are in the main A room. Brings back memories because, you know, spent many of hour in this room, you know, just doing drum tracks, just kind of hanging out. To be in a real studio for the first time to record, this was it, you know.
It was intimidating because you start thinking, well, these guys are used to the pros. They're used to recording bands that we look up to. Are they going to think we're a bunch of hacks?
They just weren't, you know, a bunch of hacks. You could just tell from the beginning that they were into it, that they cared about what they did, and they were serious.
And Scott was so nice. I mean, I didn't feel intimidated by him. He's just such a sweetheart of a guy and couldn't have been more accommodating of a person.
I can't overstate how important it was that we came here and worked with Scott in the beginning because we needed some direction.
We didn't know what to bring as far as gear. We were ready like guitar-wise and bass guitar-wise and drum set-wise, but as far as like what they should all sound like, we didn't really know.
Look at all that stuff.
Look at all those little knobs.
Look at this, man.
Look at that. Ooh, isn't that
That's
nice?
a lot of stuff.
Well, they weren't too knowledgeable that you could punch in and, you know, multi-tracking and things like that.
He gave us some ideas where, oh, maybe you should have a solo here because this section sounds kind of bare, that kind of thing, or, oh, that harmony's not working.
You went on that riff for 2 minutes. Maybe it would be catchier if you only did it for 8 bars instead of 4.
Because the band was kind of a train wreck back then, but in a good way. By the time we got into the studio, it was a little more under control.
Cannibal's always had an abrasive kind of sound, like almost out of control kind of sound, and I think it's exciting. It's almost like it's just a freight train running at full steam, and sometimes it might derail, but it just stays on just enough so it doesn't go crazy.
Controlling the madness, that was what Scott did.
As far as making a bunch of young kids that were probably annoying him to no end with asking him questions about bands that he had recorded, like Death and Sepultura.
I give him a lot of credit for putting up with the kind of nonsense you got to put up with a bunch of young guys that don't really know what they're doing.
When you're there and you're not in the studio itself, you're in the lobby.
This is where we did a lot of our hanging out, you know, and downtime or what have you, know, eat some lunch and watch some TV.
Jack, we're feed the fish. I'm gonna disappear for y'all.
Look at this. Holy shit, what happened? Wait, let's see if we can get him back.
I'm over here!
Bob, come back!
Oh, I can't even explain any of that stuff.
We were trying to get as tech as possible with the disappearing.
It was pretty high technology back then.
Film me here, all right? Film me there. Frame.
We would watch that shit over and over and just laugh. We never wanted to go back. We really loved that tape we had, me and Paul riding back. I don't think we took that tape out of the cassette deck the whole way back to Buffalo. I think we just jammed that.
It's probably my favorite album in the sense of it's our first album, and that is as pure as it was going to be. It had that raw quality to it, just pure adrenaline, that pure from the heart. Man, everyone was just playing and loved it. I mean, this is what we wanted to do. It's so bad.
I was reading the lyrics and listening to the CD and thinking, I can't believe somebody actually mixed metal and gore.
All 5 of us in the band loved horror movies and stories and all that, so it was a common kind of a thing.
We wanted that to be, you know, what the band was about. Gore, killing, cutting people up and eating them.
You love it, and it's exhilarating, and, you know, it's like, you know, the primal urge and fascination with death.
People are interested in the dark side of life. You're interested by things that you're afraid of.
You get the same joy from those kinds of things as you do from watching, like, you know, Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
We want to write about horror and aggressive stuff and songs with graphic violence. It's just what seems to be very natural for this kind of music.
No one else had taken it to that level of just sheer gore.
It's because there was bands that were doing the gore lyric and then they'd have a song about Satan or something, you know what I mean?
Or whole records would shift on topics or subject matter.
Possessed was doing the Satan stuff, and Slayer was certainly doing the Satan stuff, but they were doing a lot of death and Satan and hell.
They just got really kind of articulate about a specific type of gore.
They had a concept of how a record would look, how an artwork would look. The cover aspects of a record was being built off of the lyrical style that was being put on the record.
There was a comic book called Dead World Comics, and it was pretty big in the underground comic book scene.
Just first comic I ever did. It was a horror comic, lots of zombies and gore and very tongue-in-cheek. Kind of like Dawn of the Dead with zombies, but the zombies were intelligent. Very dark humor, lots of violence.
And we had a song called The Undead Will Feast, which is about zombies eating people. To have a guy who did a comic book based on zombies taking over the earth and that sort of thing would be the perfect match for a band like us that had songs that were horror.
I called up Vincent Locke out of the blue. I called up information. I kind of tracked him down where the comic book was from.
Chris Barnes hunted me down.
He's kind of a vampiric kind of dude.
I was a little nervous at first, getting the call from somebody I didn't know. It's like, oh, what kind of fans do I have? They're hunting me down.
I remember Barnes coming in and saying, yeah, talk to Vince Locke, and he's like, I work from midnight to 6 in the morning. He's like, cool, dude. Here's some song titles. See what you can come up with.
I was really pushing the violence on the covers for Dead World, and the band really wanted to do that on their album covers.
Paul came up with Eaten Back to Life, the album title.
I think in particular he said he wanted a zombie in the graveyard. I wanted something very energetic, so I thought, well, I'll have him ripping his own chest out, and it'd be kind of cool. Hopefully to get people's attention.
I was like, holy shit.
We're like, holy shit, that's killer.
The band liked it, seemed really happy with it.
I was like, oh my God, dude, that is fucking amazing.
He tried to incorporate some of the song titles, I think. There's a skull full of maggots on the ground. There's so much detail, so many cool things going on. A Virgin Mary covered with blood and that sort of thing on the back is thrown in as a bonus.
It sure did look great when I saw it at Home of the Hits. I was like, wow, our CDs, you know, at a record store.
We were somebody now, you know, we released an album, you know, as opposed to just having a demo out or whatever and being known in the Buffalo scene locally.
I said, we might actually do well because we have such an amazing looking cover for us. It's a way to get noticed.
I was like, this has to be a metal band. This has to be heavy.
And I remember going into the store and seeing that and went, how can they do this?
The first thing I noticed were the album covers. And
yeah, hard to masturbate to, not impossible.
And they're like, wow, this is cool. I'm interested in checking this out based on the cover. And then they hear it. Hopefully they like the music as well.
That's all I listened to night and day. That was like my favorite record for a really, really long time.
We thought it was awesome because it was really aggressive, but it had still like that thrash element going on.
They got the horror and the gore aspect of death metal right from the beginning, way before they even got the death metal musical aspect nailed down perfectly.
Because some of the songs on Eaten Back to Life, you can definitely hear a little bit more of an old school thrash influence on there.
After Eating Back to Life, we didn't do a proper tour, we just did shows here and there.
A lot of shows in the New York City area, Pittsburgh, Syracuse, Rochester, Montreal, Toronto, all the stuff that was within a drive we tried to get to.
The show that really sticks in my head was the show at the Electric Banana in Pittsburgh that was in front of like 12 people.
There was like 13 people there.
There was no one there.
Day of Death. First huge death metal festival. Cannibal Corpse, Immolation, Deceased, Radiation Sickness.
Mortician, Autopsy. A lot of these bands weren't, they were new, they were just emerging on the scene.
First time any of us saw Suffocation, absolute madness. And every single band destroyed every single one of them.
We're like, okay, well now what? I guess we just end up writing more songs. So we sat in the rehearsal space at Absolute Storage and just kept writing.
Tampa, Florida, we will be dead 1 hour and 1 half.
They went back to Scott to go and perfect more what they were doing.
They got better as songwriters.
Kind of had more of an understanding about what we were doing and really meshing more together.
What a fucking asshole. Fuck you. Oh, he says fuck you.
Back then, songs would just write themselves because you had 5 people on the same page.
It was pretty much just kind of like a collaborative effort. Whoever had a riff, kind of guy show riff, oh, I got another riff, okay, hey, it kind of fits with this. Before you know it, you have a song.
That album, I wrote all the lyrics for that.
But for the first album, I had a few lyrics, not particularly good ones. Jack contributed some lyrics, Paul contributed a few.
And then on the second one, it was kind of like, well, we were concentrating more on the music. He wanted to write the lyrics. Hey, go for it. You're the singer, sure, write the lyrics, And yeah, they were some brutal, graphic, horrific lyrics that, stirred up some controversy, got things moving.
He was one of the progenitors of the gore style, He helped create the style of the gore lyrics.
I had a lot of fun. I remember, laying in bed with a pen and paper and my Walkman on and writing lyrics to Vomit the Soul.
Cannibal Corpse, their style definitely changed over records. With the change of the music, the vocals changed fittingly.
When you look at how quick of a turnaround it went from, say, the demo to Butchered at Birth, it's night and day.
He started out having more of a creator or accused kind of voice, more of a like the raspier, higher stuff, which is still killer and in a way could be considered a different type of death metal vocal.
I knew early on when I was singing cover songs that I could never really sing high like Rob Halford or Jeff Tate, which I loved. I wish I could have sang like that, but I just didn't have that register in my voice, so I just kind of kept trying to blend my voice into the music a little bit more.
He went from here to really low, guttural vocals, super low. Just whoa, this is crazy sounding.
Just decided that was the way to go with the lyrics he was writing and the music we were writing. It's just kind of fit. And it was a natural thing for him to just go lower and lower, see how heavy the vocals could be.
The music was getting heavier and more chunky and just brutal, so I figured I would have to become another instrument as far as on top of the music.
Barnes had his own style and definitely was instantly recognizable.
Really, when you think back, who was the first guttural singer?
Chris would have to be one of the first ones, for sure.
I don't know where it started from, to be honest with you. I don't know what band was the first that came up with it. Do you know?
Chuck probably would be the first real death metal singer, I guess, from Death.
Everybody used to tell Chuck, you're the godfather of death metal. You created death metal, and Chuck was very uncomfortable with that,
thing because he was like, God, you know, bands were doing this before me. I mean, Possessed. They have a song called death metal, for God's sake.
You could probably argue Jeff Becerra from Possessed, but he wasn't maybe as guttural, you know?
There's so many different versions of it, so I'd say it's hard to really judge the initial, you know, everybody has a different answer on it.
Venom, Possessed, Celtic Frost.
Hellhammer. Yeah, Hellhammer was a big thing for us. We hear that the song Triumph of Death, and it was just like he was screaming like he was getting murdered. And we figured that's ultimate, like really have someone like killing somebody. What's that going to sound like?
I heard the Obituary record. We heard John Tardy's vocals, and we were like, you know, what the hell is this? I'm like, this guy is God.
The next guy says, well, if he goes, I'm gonna go. People that listen to death metal, unless you have like a death metal decoder in your brain, and you actually can speak in that low tone or whatever, you don't know what the hell's going on. It just sounds like a monster's on the microphone.
Just for you. Mortician. They had really low vocals before we did. Immolation did.
I think it just kind of had a slow evolution.
I feel as though I've had a good hand in laying the foundation of what a death metal vocalist is.
I'm sure there's been lots of people that have tried to imitate him as well.
I actually started doing these kind of vocals by trying to outdo Chris Barnes.
People were going, how can a human voice do that?
Most of the good singers, especially Chris's, you didn't have to do a lot of effects to them to make them sound heavy. I mean, they sounded heavy on their own.
A lot of people thought that there was harmonizers used, and I guess some bands have used harmonizers.
With the deep vocals, a lot of guys cheated. Maybe they slowed down the tape or put a lot of echo on it.
There was none of that going on with Chris.
It was important for them to let people know, look, we didn't rely on a studio or an effect to make us brutal or my voice to sound this way. They're like purists. Like, we went in and did it right.
I didn't really grasp the complete idea behind death metal until I was reading lyrics from Butchered at Birth. My parents were completely stoked on that. They loved it.
I remember eating cereal and thinking about the lyrics to Butchered at Birth and just being like, I can't even eat this. All I can think about is afterbirth.
The band's imagery really solidified on that album as far as lyrical content, artwork, music, you know, presentation.
When Vince Locke did Butchered at Birth, that was insane.
When he sent me that cover and I opened it, I was just, my jaw dropped to the ground, and then I sat down and I just stared at it.
I remember when it came in and it was kind of like, uh-oh, I wonder what Brian's going to think.
As soon as I saw it, I go, looks like we're going to have some problems at retail here.
I saw it, I think it's brilliant. It's one of the greatest covers I've ever seen. I absolutely love it.
It was even more amazing that Metal Blade put that album cover out.
I love to stir things up and, you know, get reactions out of people, and that certainly, we certainly did that with that cover.
I saw that and I was like, oh my damn, that has got to piss some people off.
It's so offensive.
Very offensive.
But it rules.
It's one thing to have people dying and do things, but you start messing with children, then people start getting pissed off.
Butchered at Birth is pretty disgusting.
Yeah.
It just makes you feel very uneasy. It took me a few attempts at the store to be able to buy the record because I was afraid of it. And I was more afraid that my parents were going to find it.
It's kind of hard to explain that to Mom. You know, I work at this place where, you know, they have record covers that, you know, have pregnant women getting dissected by zombies.
That was really the beginning right there of Cannibal Corpse, Butchered at Birth, and that album cover as far as the next step of the band.
I don't know where we are.
The first tour was in Europe.
That was October of '91.
It was such a big deal for us to not only be doing a tour finally, but also to be doing it in Europe.
Going to Europe for the first time really kind of freaked me out because I didn't know what to expect.
That was a headline tour for them because very few bands wanted to go out with them.
Metal Blade got the offer, and then they contacted me and said, hey, this guy over in Europe wants to bring you over.
A company called Metallise that we wound up working with for many, many years, they called us up and got us to come over, and we toured with the French band Loud Blast.
I think we got paid like $500 a show or something.
I couldn't believe it. I was like, we're going to get paid to go to Europe?
This is like amazing. I want to do this forever.
So I decided I'd take a semester off to go do that tour.
And we had other stuff lined up, and I remember I don't think I worked again. I think I was like, well, that's it, I'm quitting.
The band started doing really well, so I never went back to school. I never graduated.
Most of us were doing drywall finishing and, you know, working for the same company.
We're like, going back to work? Nope.
growing up. I never even thought I'd ever go to Europe.
We didn't know. We were just jamming around Buffalo. We're like, this is cool. There's like 150 people at the show.
Buffalo was a good starting grounds and proving grounds, brought all these talented musicians together, but it was actually the notoriety that they were gaining in other cities.
The minute we get off the tour bus at the first show in France, autographs, photos, everything. We're just like, wow, this is pretty big stuff over here.
Really was surprised with how many people were at our shows. They'd all heard of us and loved our music. I think we were pulling in like close to 500 people some nights.
You do headliners to 300 to 500 people. Festivals get up to like 2,000, 2,500 people.
We are in Hamburg, Germany.
But then after that, we came back. Metal Blade set us up with a booking agent.
First American tour was in 1992.
With Gorguts and Atheist, and traveled around the whole country, all of us in a passenger van.
It was all of us were just crammed into this van.
Two bands in a 15-passenger.
The very first date was in Toronto.
I would venture to say it was 20 below zero without a wind chill.
It got a flat tire. Then we left there, we went to Montreal. It was the second date.
And somebody slammed the van door, the window shatters.
Shatters from it being ice cold out.
And we got to drive all the way back down to New York with no glass in the window.
And we ended up putting cardboard up against the window, freezing our asses off.
Which is bad enough, and then we're going into New York, crossing GWB, and a trailer comes unhooked.
It didn't have an actual trailer hitch. It was like a separate hitch. It was a trailer hitch that was on the bumper.
And we pull over right before the bridge, like on the side of the road, this much space.
So Psycho and I ended up walking over the George Washington Bridge in the middle of January. It was like 10 degrees out.
We had to go get help, and we had to go to find a gas station.
We get over the other side of the bridge where the phone is. We called the rental company.
They came out with another van with another trailer hitch on it, but the ball was too small.
Started going again, didn't even get a half mile. It came off again, and that was it, it was done.
And we're pretty much dead center of the bridge, and the trailer pops off, the safety chain snaps.
I remember turning around looking, and the trailer is just rolling by itself and just goes,
and that trailer went side to side and went from the very right lane all the way over to the left lane and hit the concrete barrier and ended up in pieces.
And we're sitting there looking at almost all our equipment scattered everywhere, and they ended up shutting down the bridge because we're holding up traffic.
Stopped traffic in like 3 out of 5 lanes for about an hour, hour and a half.
We caused a pretty good ruckus, in the city that day.
And sure enough, of course, like the 10-10 winds of the news station, the helicopters flying over.
It definitely made us go, oh great, what's to come, if this is happening now.
They had the Port Authority cops yelling and screaming at them. They had the police yelling and screaming at them. People giving them the bird as they were trying to get by. People trying to get into New York just yelling at them.
I put in my first famous call to Mike Faley. I said, Mike, I'm turning this van around. We're going back home, man. I can't do this, man.
I go, right now, this isn't funny. I go, but years from now, you're going to be able to look back at this and you're going to be able to laugh at it.
We're back on the George Washington Bridge, and things are going a lot better this time.
A lot better. The trailer's still on the back.
That first tour with Gorguts and Atheist, and the European tour made us even work harder from that point on.
We just kind of wanted to get better and better as the albums went along.
They want to do something heavier. Everyone wanted to do something just a little bit more above, the notch. You're a little heavier than what everyone else was doing.
Bands like us, Deicide, Morbid Angel, Cannibal Corpse, trying to be heavier than Black Sabbath or Slayer, Celtic Frost.
We were always about pushing those boundaries, and trying to be faster and harder and more technical and more everything.
I think the key to those bands was they didn't think about it. They just did it.
I really just think it was all kind of coming from within us, who we were going to be as a band, and then as you get going, other bands are doing stuff, and then maybe you got a little more guidelines. You can have some other references. Oh, well, wow, listen what that band's doing. Listen what that band's doing.
A lot of the Cannibal Corpse signature things are things that happened by accident. We'd hear one thing from one of our favorite bands and then kind of try and imitate it. We'd be imitating it in the wrong way, and it wound up being our style.
There's certain things you hear in a Cannibal where you don't hear in other bands, where there's the speed part is there, there's always just the pounding beat. I call it the Cannibal groove. It definitely separates them from all other bands.
Cannibal with another drummer, it just wouldn't sound like Cannibal at all.
The first thing that I would notice was the drums because, you know, I'm a drummer trying to learn to play. And yeah, when I heard the Paul stuff, I was like, yeah, I'm not going to do this anytime soon.
He's got his own style, really, as far as a death metal drummer goes. Not many people can play like him.
He pretty much invented a new style of drum beat, which is like the bomb blast beat.
It was no conscious effort. It wasn't like, well, this is how I'm going to do it. It was more like, okay, let me sit down literally and go, this is what comes out, and that's the way I played.
The way Paul played, it was just kind of on the verge of out of control. Snare on top, and we just went with it because we didn't know any better. But it worked.
I'm listening to, say, Pete Sandoval, and I'm not trying to mimic exactly what he does, but I'm doing my own version. So my version of that kind of a beat was different. I was playing with 2 kick drums.
I didn't understand what was going on, but it sounded like a freight train. It had this like freight train sound to it, and I was like, this is sick. How does he do that? He's getting into it. It's like, bah, 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 bah.
Attacks that drum kit like he's running a race.
Frantic.
Machine gun fire, man. Yeah, I didn't know how you would survive a whole tour just playing that fast. It was crazy. I could have a heart attack.
The original blast is a 1-foot blast, you know. It's just, you know, 1 foot meaning you're only playing on 1 kick drum and you're playing, you know, the snare kick and you know, the ride cymbal maybe, and it's a super hyper beat.
For his blast, he'll play the double bass fast, say similar to a fast Dave Lombardo beat where you've got...
You know, I played my ride and my hi-hat, you know, with my right hand and all that, but when I went to try to do this beat, for some reason, it just felt natural for me to play the snare drum with my right hand and use my left hand on the hi-hat.
It was just trying to play so fast that he had to break from tradition just to get like that and just play as fast as he possibly could with his hands and his feet.
He hits the hi-hat and the snare drum at the same time, but does double bass under that.
That's how he plays. Like if this was a snare drum, hi-hat, he would play it like that.
So the snare is getting the power of his right hand, his strong hand.
If you play your hi-hat with your left and your snare with your right, you can get more snare hits in, and your arm won't get so tired as if you're doing this.
In a drumming sense, that is probably a better approach to it because if you are playing this way, it's much easier for you to get around the drums, get around the roll, whereas if you're like this, you got to then cross your hands and then, you know, come out of it.
I've never looked at myself as being a percussionist. A lot of drummers I look at and a lot of musicians, you know, they're percussionists. They can play, they can read music, they can do, I can't do any of that. I mean, I never learned how to read music. I never took formal lessons or anything like that.
He's got a standard setup, you know, 3 rack toms, floor toms, double bass, no triggers, you know, I use mics on everything. He's only got 3 cymbals, a ride, and a china on his side. And that's it, just real, you know, stripped down, just has what he needs, plays what he needs, doesn't have too much bullshit around him, and it fits.
Paul's playing totally lends itself to that sound. I don't think that sound would have been the same if it wasn't for his approach to drumming.
It's not too fancy or intricate, but it is, I mean, like, you know it's Cannibal, you know it's Paul.
I play Cannibal Corpse style drums, that's what I do. I don't think I'd want to play in another band or even be able to play in another band. When we came down to do Tomb of the Mutilated, I know talking to Scott, and Scott was like, man, I'd really love to have Jack play all the rhythms. Nothing against Bob, it's a playing thing, and that's what a lot of bands do.
It sounded tighter at the time. To have one guitarist play it because their styles were very different.
His playing style was unorthodox, self-taught guitarist.
Playing live, it sounds cool, everything's good, but when you put it side by side, perhaps on a record, you know, it doesn't sound quite as tight.
He still got his message across. What he was playing, I could understand where he was coming from with it. His execution just wasn't the best.
Bruce would do his leads, and then if there was problems with tightness between rhythm guitar, I would just play it.
James Hetfield would play all the rhythms for Metallica because he's the stronger rhythm player, and just whoever was the stronger rhythm player out of like 2 guitar players in a band, apparently that's what they did.
That was probably a real difficult thing, you know, that we probably redid some of Bob's tracks.
It wasn't like against him, obviously, as a person or anything. It just, you know, just was going to we felt was going to better, you know, that album to have Jack play all the rhythms.
If you have enough time and money, you could sit with somebody and redo stuff, and you know, but unfortunately, time and money we don't have a lot of.
You're still in the band, man. You know, you're still playing live.
Things were kind of moving in a weird direction at that point, but we put together a killer record. It was an excellent session.
If you're willing to say, take criticism and say, make these better, Or when you leave, you say, you know what, I really realize now that I need to practice on this. It's about bettering yourself in your craft, right? I mean, you can only do what you want to do, and each album is a snapshot in time.
I always thought their covers were equally as powerful as the music itself.
Eaten Back to Life, and it was just like, oh, yeah, this is brutal. And then Butchered at Birth sent it way over the top, but Tomb of the Mutilated, Decimated, anything you can really do taste-wise.
Wasn't that a pussy getting eaten by a corpse or something?
That's the only one that had a sex act on it. Everything else was just all about the violence, and if you bring the sex into it, it's even more shocking.
It was just like, whoa, are they gonna get away with this stuff?
You can fly under the radar for a while, but eventually they're going to pinpoint you and say you can't do that anymore.
Ultimately, we had to do dual covers for some of the things to try to get it into more mainstream retail.
The first dual cover was after Butchered at Birth, because Butchered at Birth created a big controversy.
What it did was it kind of just, made them have this huge reputation. It's like, ooh.
Sometimes if you don't want somebody to know about something, you should keep your mouth shut and not try to bring it up, and not sit there and scream about it.
Anything you tell people not to do or not to buy or not to listen to, people are going to try to find a way to do that.
They're going to want it that much more.
Oh, yeah. Are you kidding me?
Parental advisory logo is bigger than the Cannibal Corpse logo on the CD, so that has to tell you something. I mean, look at that. That's what things should be, right? Push the envelope.
My mom didn't really like them. She confiscated it from me because she thought it was too gross and inappropriate for a kid of my age, because she saw entrails ripped from a virgin's cunt.
I tilted the tape and I saw the song Entrails Ripped from a Virgin's Cunt.
Me too.
And I was like, I'm gonna shelve this one for now. Yeah. I'm not ready for this. Me and my bowl cut, my Harry Potter glasses are not ready for this shit.
They talking about abortions and eating shit and killing this and that, and I'm just like, yo, this is some crazy shit right here.
The key is once you get past the cover, then of course the substance has to be there, and that's what Cannibal was getting better at each and every record, was that they were getting better at their instruments, better at their songwriting, and creating this awesome brutality.
As the band continued to build and continued to get bigger and better in their early stages, people started to look past stuff on the covers, on the band's name, and take a look at what they were doing musically.
Tomb of the Mutilated, that's my favorite one. Just the energy level is amazing on it.
First album I ever heard by Cannibal Corpse was Tomb of the Mutilated, and right from Hammer Smash Face, it's just, I was blown away.
I heard that and was like, what the fuck is this?
That's one of my favorites that just moves so fast.
So this is my best Chris Barnes impression singing Hammer Smash Face.
Something's inside me. It is coming out. I don't know the rest of the lyrics.
Tomb of the Mutilated was a really big record for us.
That record, I thought, put them on a map. That really set them apart.
2/3 of the way through the Tomb of the Mutilated album cycle was probably when you start thinking, okay, now it's becoming a little more real. These guys are definitely getting into another league here.
You could see it in the crowds that were coming out. You could see it in the magazines. Something was happening. I think that's when people realized that the band just wasn't a Johnny-come-lately. They were going to stay around for a while.
The Hammer Smash Face EP was a pretty good continuance of that. We ended up deciding to do some cover songs, and thought that it'd be cool to go back to meet up with Dennis Fura.
And we recorded the two songs for the Hammer Smashed EP here, The Exorcist and Zero the Hero. Jack was going to do the first half of the Zero the Hero solo, and Bob was going to do the second half.
The way certain recording sessions had gone over the past couple of years, we figured he might have, kind of known that he was really going to have to, step it up or things were not going to work out. And he did not manage to step it up.
And I remember you going, I think it was, oh, you guys got a half hour or something, what do we do? Well, we had to change it and get Jack to finish the solos. So then we had a decision to make. We all thought to each other, well, we have to tell Bob that we changed his solo, because, we can't just think he did a solo and then change it. And we felt that's not right, So I remember, I think it was Barnes called him that night even maybe saying, hey, dude, we had to, change your solo.
We were also pretty young at that time, and we probably weren't very good at we didn't really know how to handle the situation. We're like, well, what do we do? Bob's having a hard time keeping up.
We were really kind of leaning more towards like Alex and Jack's writing at that point than, say, Bob's writing, you know, because he did write a lot in the beginning, you know, a lot of songs Rusey did write, you know, in the first couple of albums, you know, and even on Tomb of the Mutilated too.
I don't think a lot of our songs wouldn't have been, we wouldn't have written them if it wasn't for Bob, because he had a real offbeat way of writing and a very unique writing style.
Rusey was monumental. He's the guy that came up with the Skull Full of Maggots riffs, arguably our most popular song, you know, of all time.
I credit him with a lot of that, a lot of the greatest songs we ever wrote.
It was a different style of writing, so that was good, of course.
It took Alex and Jack to really make it concrete and decipher it.
He had some really abrasive sounding riffs like nobody I've ever heard before. It's unique because it's part of their identity, it's part of their sound.
He was, I think, recognized more for his presence on stage than anything else.
Bob was a very powerful stage presence. I mean, he's definitely a little bit bigger than the rest of us, and he was just up there like, oh.
It was kind of wild looking to me. It looked like he was just going out of control, like he was trying to jump out of his body or something.
He definitely stay the hell out of his way on stage. He was putting everything into it. I mean, he really was a brutal performer. He was fully into doing the best he could and everything. It was not for lack of effort, so it was a very difficult decision for us to let Bob go.
We felt bad at the same time, because here's the first time we're making a major change in the band, a band that we all started, all 5 of us, and he's an original guy, and you know, I went to school with him in Barnsley, and we've known the guy, and here we have to kick him out of the band.
We picked the worst time to tell Bob he was out of the band, and we had Alex do it.
It's not easy to talk about. You don't even want to say it to someone, you know, especially when you're friends with them.
We called him up, and the Buffalo Bills just won the championship, and they're going to the Super Bowl.
Everyone's happy in Buffalo. I mean, everyone's elated. Oh, by the way, Bob, you're out of the band.
It was not fun to have to give him the bad news.
It was rough, you know, but it was something that we felt definitely had to be done.
It really upset Bob, you know, he took it really bad.
You know, it's not easy to talk about now. It's something I'd rather not even think about, really.
I should have talked to Bob after that, but I think he was so hurt and so angry and hated us so deeply.
He pretty much gave up playing guitar and didn't want to have anything to do with the music scene or any of us or bands or anything like that.
And we have not heard from him since then.
Sorry that he dropped off the planet, so to speak, because he was a really good person, too, at heart.
Yeah, because it would be cool to see him, you know. I mean, we haven't seen him a long time, and he was a part of the band, obviously, and he was there since the beginning.
I kind of wish that, like, somebody knew where Rusey was just to get his little piece in on it.
I said that too, man.
He never has made any effort to get in touch with us or anything.
It's just unfortunate that his abilities weren't progressing along with the rest of the guys. Otherwise, he'd probably still be in the band.
Sucks, because he was a great guy, but got to move on. At that point, we're 3 albums in, and we got to move on.
Bob was out, and then we're like, okay, well, who are we going to get?
And we were going on the road in like 3 weeks or something, and I was like, okay, this ain't the greatest time to kick out your guitar player, but, you know, we had no choice, and we're scrambling to get a replacement at this point.
My name was mentioned, and then Alex called me while I was living in Miami.
You know, we were still in Buffalo here, and Rob was already living down in Miami.
Rob wasn't in a band. He just kind of came down. He was a great rhythm guitar player, looking for a band.
I saw Malevolent Creation played with Primeval and Cannibal and Cynic up at a show in Buffalo. And I seen them guys playing, and I was like, damn, I gotta move to Florida.
We introduced Rob to people that became his band Solstice, that started his first project.
I started it with the drummer, Alex Marquez, down in Miami, and the guitar player, Dennis Munoz.
And they did an album at More Sound with Rob singing and playing guitar.
Yeah, he's fucking got a great voice. He's got an awesome voice.
I pretty much started singing out of the fact that we just really couldn't find a singer with the voice that we were kind of shooting for.
It's incredible. It's a great record. It stands up today, right now. Put it on.
Right after the Solstice thing, him and Alex Marquez did Malevolent.
Yeah, me and the drummer, Alex, we pretty much joined Malevolent while we still had Solstice going. We just put Solstice on hold.
Well, Malevolent Creation was another band from Buffalo, New York, that had moved down to South Florida and kind of put their footing in there.
Rob was always a good friend of ours, and he was into the same music we were into. It seemed like a good fit.
We recorded Retribution.
We had problems with Malevolent, like normal, and then he You got offered something good for Cannibal.
I got in touch with him and I said, well, look, you're still in this band Solstice, but do you have time to come up and do some touring with us?
I said, of course, and then I flew up to Buffalo and I learned their set like in 2 weeks or something.
He learned like a song a day.
Really amused by all the Cannibal stuff, just the absurdity of the riffs and the lyrics. The first couple of rehearsals, as he's learning the stuff, he's just laughing.
The riffs were different to me, you know, I had to like adjust to their style.
Eventually he grabbed hold and went death metal.
I actually wasn't asked to join the band. I pretty much was just asked to fulfill the tour commitments that they had at the time.
We didn't really know what we were gonna do in the long term. It was kind of like, all right, we need a filler for now. You know, we'll work on, you know, are we gonna keep them or are we gonna find a guitar player, obviously, after the touring's all done. After we did that tour with Rob, it just seemed like a natural thing because we knew him already. He's from Buffalo, you know, we're friends in a sense, and he's a great guitar player.
Great guy, known him forever. Just made sense to get him in.
They pretty much said, hey, you're more than welcome to stay with us if you want. Pretty much saying I could join the band.
It was early 1993 when Rob joined up with us. We'd been friends with Rob as long as we'd been friends with any of the people on the Buffalo scene. We went way back with him.
The year before, I was in Malevolent Creation, and we did a tour with Obituary, Agnostic Front, and Cannibal Corpse.
This was the first time we actually had a tour bus, and we were on the bus with Malevolent, and Rob was in the band at the time, and we were all just partying every night. I mean, it was a traveling sideshow of circus freaks.
We got along great. We had fun together.
I came down to the bus to see where Bob was, and he was down there stumbling around in the hallway. And Barrett was already in the back of the bus, kind of. Me and Bob were like in the front kind of the bus. And Bob ran down the hall and basically just clocked Barrett right in the head and knocked him down.
That was out of nowhere. That's kind of an obscure moment in time there.
I can't even really actually remember what happened.
Nothing happened. He just came at you for no reason.
Oh, he just knocked me
He
down?
just fucking decked you. He came running from the front of the bus and just decked you.
Yeah,
Right?
he was really drunk.
Yeah, oh yeah,
And
he was wasted,
Yeah, he
dude.
wanted to
He
let out his frustration on somebody, and it was me.
I know we all kind of like later on thought Bob must have had a premonition that night that Barrett was going to replace him, and he just got his shot in. And Rob came into the picture, you know, in a big way.
And Rob joined up, and then all of a sudden we're going to Russia and doing a movie, and he was probably like, wow.
I got a phone call from Mike Faley one day, and he was like, hey, Chris, I got an offer for you guys to do a movie. Have you ever heard of this comedian, Jim Carrey?
We knew of Jim. We thought he was a really funny guy in Living Color and everything. We were all aware of his comedy.
Friday night, probably about 5 o'clock at night, get a call. Hey, Mike, do you think that Cannibal Corpse can make it down here Sunday?
We told Alex, and Alex didn't think it was a good idea at first.
I just want to make sure that we're not going to look stupid in this movie.
When I got the script and kind of read through the script, I'm like, oh boy. I don't know, this looks really corny and cheesy.
We're like, whatever's going around us, we don't care. Like, if Jim Carrey's running around doing crazy stuff or whatever they're doing, that's fine. But we want to, if we're going to be Cannibal Corpse in the movie, we want to behave the way we always do.
They didn't think the band would agree to it, but we said, sure, why not? Let's go in there and do this thing.
I remember first hearing that they were going to be in the movie and thinking, that is the craziest thing I've ever heard of.
I guess, you know, Jim Carrey really wanted us in that.
Jim Carrey, back in the day, huge death metal fan.
Getting his makeup done for the movie, and he was cranking out Pantera and listening to AC/DC.
He liked us. I think he liked DSI, Napalm Death.
He came out of his trailer and he was wearing the clothes that he had on in the movie.
Yeah, yeah.
And I just couldn't stop laughing. I was like, oh my God, here he is.
Dude, that's funny.
And he seemed more excited about meeting us. Like, it was so crazy. It was like, oh my God, it's Cannibal Corpse.
He knew all the material that we did. He knew the albums. He was asking us to play songs in soundcheck that we didn't even remember anymore.
He said, so what song are you gonna do? Hammer Smash Face or Rancid Amputation?
Dude,
he already
was weird.
I could only imagine Rob at that time with Jim Carrey.
It's like two magnets being, you know, force
reverse.
Yeah, reverse.
Two of the same kinds of like crazy, frenetic, comedic, like you know, freaks.
I did mention that I could contort my arm, you know how he did all those crazy body movements, and I was like, yeah, well, I can twist my arm around, and I did that. And he was like, quite impressive.
I remember Chris, I think, asked him to do Fire Marshal Bill, and he did.
Kind of just was like nails on a chalkboard. I would see that vein pop out of the neck, and you know, he's like, that makes you, you know, that gets you sick, you know, that's. He's like, what, this? And I was like, no, dude.
They filmed for 4 days, and it's all you see in the movie is like a minute and a half of those guys.
We had to fake playing to nothing. The crowd couldn't make a sound. They had to look like they were making noise.
There were people there that were moshers, like full-on, you know, like hardcore and death metal people.
Just fucking hearing Cannibal Corpse coming over the PA loud. They were just doing what they usually did, get crazy.
There were guys from Malevolent Creation in the audience. And the one guy who does a stage dive is from a band called Brutal Mastication. You see him jumping, a guy named Jimmy.
The director's trying to explain it. No, you can't make any noise. You have to make believe.
Well, they cut the playback, so all you hear is all these feet. The mosh pit, silent mosh pit.
It was definitely a little intimidating, but it was cool to watch it all come together and see that.
And of course, it was phenomenal. I mean, Jim Carrey made that movie. It's just, I couldn't believe. It's like, wait, that script is what I just saw on the screen?
I actually went to the theaters to see that, and they go to the concert scene and the Hammer Smash Face start. I couldn't believe it. I was like, this is awesome. This is the coolest movie ever.
He backs at that door and you hear, and I said, I freaked out. I was like, I wasn't even in the band. I'm like, that's fucking Cannibal Corpse.
Like 20 death metal heads in this movie theater start banging their heads and moshing.
I screamed in the movie, like, yeah!
And all these parents and like kids are looking around going, what's going on? They were freaking out.
And Rob's wearing a Cynic shirt and that.
I was like, yeah, I'm gonna wear a Cynic shirt just to show some support for a friend's band.
He wore that Cynic shirt in that scene. When you see him grinding out, it's like, yeah.
I saw the guitar first. I recognized it because his head was down and the hair hanging. I go, that's Rob. That's my son.
You got people that are having to see the movie, had to be subject to Cannibal Corpse, whether they liked it or not.
A lot of kids who've never been exposed to this music were exposed to it, and they were like, wow, that's pretty sick.
I actually told my father that we were going on tour with the band that was in Ace Ventura, because he loves that movie, and it's the only like reference point I could give him. And then he was very confused by it.
I still use that as like the claim to fame, pretty much. Well, you may have heard us. We were in a movie, you know, Ace Ventura. Oh, you were in that movie?
I'd say about 3 weeks after that point, the band got asked about the movie Airhead, I believe it was.
I was like, yeah, let's do another one. But then they found out like a week later that we had just done Ace Ventura, so they were like, oh no, we're gonna have to pass.
We're like, oh damn, we're gonna miss out on this movie. And again, you don't know which one's gonna be huge. Out comes Jim Carrey's movie, which is #1 in the country the first week out. Cannibal Corpse is in it.
I don't know one person that's never seen that movie, so you can imagine what it did to their career.
And what do you remember about Airheads? Nothing.
What a, you know, lucky break they got on that. It was awesome for them.
And obviously, it had a huge step forward in their career.
Our first 3 records are really raw. There are definitely things left on those records that if you really put it under a microscope, you could consider it a mistake. But those little flaws and human inconsistencies were the kind of things that we didn't really notice back then. We didn't mind leaving them.
They don't have the budgets, and it's not about the technical aspect of the bands being perfect, but the raw energy that is there.
I remember that feeling back then, you know, of just pure, like, who the hell knows what's gonna happen, but let's just make it happen anyway.
For the Bleeding, Scott was like, look, I want you guys to sound that much tighter. I want you to be able to step up and be right up there with the greatest death metal bands in the world.
We wrote The Bleeding during the winter in a haunted house.
We are inside the famed Music Mall in Buffalo, New York. Yeah, it's been 14 years, I guess, since we practiced here last, and it's been a while since I was actually in this building, so here we are. Let's go check it out and see what we come up with, you know. Nothing much has changed in the sense of the way it looks, that's for sure. In Room D here is where The Bleeding, like I said, was pretty much written and, you know, arranged.
We were really passionate about writing and doing the best we could.
Taking our time instead of trying to be just over the top musically.
Tensions were high here and there, even during that whole session.
That was kind of a big transition period. We started to do things a little bit differently. We were really starting to focus more, or more heavily, I should say, on songwriting.
We want to write songs that are structured, first chorus, middle section, more arranged, more deranged, more stick in your head kind of thing.
I co-wrote like 2 or 3 songs with Jack and Alex. Everybody was writing together at that time.
He brought a freshness to the band, a new guitar player, somebody different. You know, we can maybe do some more things that we weren't able to do.
Scott was mixing the Bleeding, and he butted heads with Barnes over the mixes.
Is that loud enough?
Nope.
I think that should be pumped up a little. Bass needs to be louder. No, the vocals need to be louder. You know, the guitar isn't loud enough. Wait, the snare.
They argued about it, blah, 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 and eventually Scott's just like, you know what? You guys can mix your own fucking record. I'm out of here. And we're like, wow, I've never seen that before. Producer just walked out. We're fucked.
I'm sure we had a lot of, you know, got pissed off at times and things like that. I don't remember that specific incident.
You'll run into bands that have recorded with Scott, and it's like, wow, man, he freaked out on us. He's like, fuck you guys, mix your own record, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, hey, he did that to us too. I talk to DSI guys like, yeah, dude, he told us to fuck off, mix our own record.
May have said something, but I don't think it lasted more than a few minutes.
Guys are all right.
Yeah, that's right. That's the classic Scott Burns imitation voice. Yeah, it's killer, man. Everyone's got their high-pitched Scott Burns imitation.
That's cool, man. Don't be happy. Don't worry. It'll be all right.
Scott Burns.
Dude, stop.
That's a classic Scott Burns. He says that about everything. He'll push the stop on the chorus. Dude, I'm not saying. I mean, you know what? I mean.
What? Sounds fun. Fucking mix your own album. Fucking out of here.
I remember hearing basically Scott walk outside the studio, sit on the deck, and scream at the top of his lungs for minutes at a time.
He came out here and he was like, excuse me, guys. He closed the door and he went, fuck, real loud. I don't know what he was mad about, but
Probably something I said to him. Probably me annoying him.
He just had to relieve himself from some frustration.
What's this?
And I don't blame him. I couldn't do what producers do. This button over here, that's my favorite one out of the whole bunch.
He's working his ass off.
Pulling his hair out of his head because all of us in the room probably was so hard after all those years.
I'm gonna fucking scream, man.
And there's tempers flaring and people pulling and indecision. It could be a little tough. So I remember it being a little stressful during the Bleeding sessions.
But it was well worth it because that by far is his best production ever. That's still my favorite production sound out of anything. It's really amazing. The bass tone and the guitars are just smoking.
The Bleeding album, that's when I really stood up and took notice because I was like, wow, this is a talented band playing some really cool riffs.
The Bleeding I thought was awesome. Like, you know, the songwriting was great.
That was when I thought they started coming into their own songwriting-wise.
It was like the pinnacle for the band. It was so fucking catchy, but it was still brutal. It was still death metal.
It's not about being the fastest. It's not about being the most technical. It's about writing a good riff with a good beat.
There's nothing wrong with writing riffs. Plausible, catchy riffs that you can hum in your head or you can remember.
You remember these fucking songs as soon as you hear them.
It has the creepiest chords in
Cool.
It brought him to a really new status. A lot of hits on that album. Almost like hit singles for Cannibal Corpse, if there could be such a description.
You fuck your girlfriend to Cannibal Corpse?
Yeah, right before I kill any future girlfriend, I put on some Cannibal Corpse, open a bottle of wine. Yep.
Stripped, raped, and strangled. Stripped, raped, and strangled, probably my favorite.
The Bleeding probably really broke them big time.
Around that time, after we get home from doing some touring, I think we were all like, you know what, this is our job now, this is our career, we're doing good, we're making, a living off the band, which is more than we can even have ever asked for, kind of a thing. But I think at that point everybody was just kind of getting a little sick of Buffalo in a sense.
We really liked Tampa. We felt like it was time to just try something different.
Tampa made sense at this point because we already recorded 4 CDs down here. So it became a second home to us.
We've got the studio, we've got friends that we already made in bands.
The weather in Buffalo can be a little bit of a pain in the neck.
The winter before we moved, I remember it, it was one of the worst we've had in years.
I don't miss this kind of weather. It's nice to have the 4 seasons and all, but winter can get old fast.
A couple of times it was negative 50 with the wind chill. I remember it was probably the coldest that I've ever felt, and I remember it was probably the coldest it ever was in Buffalo.
Next thing you know, we're like, moved down to Tampa. Like Beverly Hillbillies.
That sucked.
That really sucked.
It sucked. I mean, it was great for the band, but for friends that had hung out with them for so long and would go to every show, it was a good move on their part, but it kind of sucked for us.
I'll see you guys on tour, huh? Thank you.
Weird, because a lot of people still think we're from Tampa.
I went onto the website and sat there and scanned the biography, and it said something along the lines of born in Buffalo, but, nurtured in Tampa. And I'm
like, no, fuck you.
Man,
it's born in Buffalo, nurtured in Buffalo, from Buffalo.
I think Buffalo had a bigger scene than Tampa as far as attendance at shows and as far as a really brutal local fan base.
We came out, we went on tour, and then that was it. We were gone. We rarely played Florida. We rarely came and played Tampa.
Yeah, there was like the occasional gig, but it wasn't about the hometown scene. It was like, we just happened to live here, and now we're going on tour.
There's not like a Sunset Strip where there was death metal people walking all over the place. There's no equivalent of that I was ever aware of in Tampa.
Bands like Unleashed would come there, Entombed, and they'd be like, well, take us to the metal bar. And
Where's that? How'd they say that?
Yeah, we'd take them to like some gothic bar or something, like a dance club.
The Castle.
And they'd be floored. They'd be like, what the hell is this shit?
People got confused thinking it was a big scene here, like there was a lot of people that would go see shows. I think it was just more that there was a lot of bands that lived here.
It ended up becoming, known as the death metal capital of the world, I guess, for those reasons.
I don't really think of Cannibal Corpse when I think of Tampa.
We actually consider ourselves to be a Buffalo death metal band pretty much to this day.
They don't have Floridian accents. They sound like they're from New York.
I just like the way those guys talk. They all say stuff like harsh and gonna take out the garbage.
They say that's how we talk over there with the hard R.
Well, I mean, the R.
We don't say R like that.
say
We
R
just
like
say
that.
it normal.
Car. I'm like, okay, yeah, you're right. I'm from Buffalo still, yeah.
Park your car in the yard. We're having a barbecue. One of these warehouses back here was where we first practiced when we moved down to Tampa.
That was a place called J.J. Suds.
Started writing the new Cannibal album, Created to Kill It was going to be called.
We had all the music recorded except the guitar solos. All the guitars and the bass and the drums were done.
We were like, yes, we got some great music. This is awesome. This is the heaviest stuff we've ever done. We felt so happy about it.
And we were on to vocals at that point.
Got into the studio, and no one said anything about when I did rehearse. I'd come up and do a new song, and everyone was like, sounds awesome.
He was up there singing, and he looked like he was working pretty hard, but we couldn't hear him.
And we started laying this stuff down. It seemed like everyone had a different idea, and they didn't like what I was laying down.
And of course, that was much more apparent when you're hearing them in the studio setting, where you can really nitpick and define it and hear everything perfect, as opposed to hearing it up at the practice room, which obviously we didn't hear.
They didn't like the vocal phrasing. It's just strange. It kind of was a weird session.
Musically, I think the guys were writing more technical stuff.
They were pretty much pushing the envelope as far as that went.
They wanted to see the vocals go in a different direction.
And at that point, we took them aside and said, you gotta change something or do something with like the delivery and maybe some of the lyrics.
We wanted to rewrite some of these songs that we felt that we could write the lyrics, maybe the patterns better, because we are the ones that wrote the music.
It took me 7, 8 months. They were just looking at it very fleetingly and kind of like, you know, not as important as how I was really thinking about it.
That was like really kicking him in the head, basically, because he never heard that before. Nobody has ever told him, well, I'm going to write lyrics, you know, for these songs now. You know, he was the main lyric writer.
I wanted to sing about my own feelings about things. I didn't want to sing about someone else's feelings.
Chris was being, you know, fairly adamant that he wanted to keep things the way he had them.
He was not willing to work with us, which we felt like, well, we're a band and we all should be happy here, and if we're not, this is how the band started. You know, it's always been a democracy. You know, everyone's got their say, and if certain things aren't working, well, you know, it's not one person's band.
I didn't go into the practice room and say, oh, hey, you know what? I like that. I don't like that guitar part. I think you should play it like this.
I would hate to like really love something and not be able to use it. And I would hate for the other guys to really love something and not be able to use it. And that was maybe the problem with Chris. There were certain things that he loved that we did not want him to use.
I'm a really proud person. I work really hard at what I do. I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and it's really, at that time, it's very difficult for me to think that anyone could do something that was better than what I was going to come up with, and I was holding my guns.
When you're really sure of your artistic vision, you want things to be your way. And I think that was maybe the problem with him, is that his vision of the way things would go, he needed it to have it be that way, and that wasn't necessarily the way me or maybe Paul wanted it to be, or the other guys.
Being young at the time, I was just pretty pissed off about being told what to do. That's not why I got into death metal. It was more of a freedom thing and more of being against everything else, that where things were told, you know, you had to do this, you had to do that. No, that's why I got in the band. Now the guys I'm with are kind of telling me those things. Well, it was like I was almost self-destructing because I was like against the one people I was with.
When I listened to Eaten Back to Life, our first album, and I listened to Barnes' vocals on that, I go, man, that's awesome. I mean, you could tell he was singing from the heart. He was passionate. I mean, he wants to be there. He loves these songs. He wants to sing them. I didn't feel that in the latter years.
It obviously built up over a long period of time.
You know, I just kind of kept getting a little bit weirder and weirder between all of us.
I ain't gonna lie and say that we got along the whole time and then he got along with the rest of the band the whole time. That would be bullshit. There were problems, but there were also plenty of good times too.
We always had fun. He was just a fun guy to be around. We had a good time. We would laugh.
Come on, let's see what we got in here.
They'd been together a long time and they were good friends. And there's personality issues and things like that outside of just the musical space.
The real personality difficulties happened way back, like around Butchered at Birth time.
Obviously, I've had some problems over the years with him personally, you know, which are, you know, I'm not going to get into, but it didn't help his situation, of course. You know, it wasn't like we had some tight-knit brotherly thing going at this point anymore. You know, it was very much us against him kind of a thing.
Because he was the front man, he did a lot of the business. He was the face of Cannibal Corpse at the time. Most of the interviews, I think, were done by him.
Magazines and, you know, media wanted to interview me because they were very intrigued with the subject matter that I was putting across in the lyrics.
Being front man and doing all the interviews, probably a little jealousy on our part built up over the years. And you know, we had our vision of what the band should be and what it should evolve to, and he had another idea of kind of making it his own thing.
He kind of maybe was put up on a little bit of a pedestal there, so I think a little bit of ego came into that, and when the band said, we'd like to make these changes, it wasn't well received by him at all.
Things were so tense and at a boiling point.
Chris went away. He had already had the schedule to go away and do a tour with 6 Feet Under.
And I think Scott really couldn't believe that I did it, but I just said, fuck it, I'm just going out on tour. I'll finish this when I get back.
6 Feet probably started a year or two before.
Did the first 6 Feet Under demo. That was sometime in early '94 probably.
Nobody had really talked about doing side projects at that point.
He wanted to do more like he's doing with 6 Feet Under.
I remember sitting there writing the first couple songs of that demo lyrically and thinking, man, these things are pretty cool. I mean, I think the fans would like this if this ever came out.
We had some downtime, and it gave us time to think, and we're like, you know, maybe this is the time to change. He's got this other thing going on. We're not happy with how he's sounding now. If we part company with him now, then he's got something else that he can do, so we're not totally leaving him hanging.
We all got together and we were like throwing names around, like who should we get? And then I was just saying, hey, we should get George.
We really were big fans of George when he was in Monstrosity.
We knew of his abilities in Monstrosity. We've heard him sing. We've seen him live. He had a great presence and all that.
I knew Rob. Rob played some shows at Monstrosity, and Rob was in Cannibal, and when he decided to give it to Barnes, Rob had Alex call me.
We called up George. We had him come down and try it out. Chris was still on tour.
This is Alex from Cannibal Corpse. What's going on, man? And I'm like, oh, hey, dude, what's going on? I was totally surprised by that. I just said, hold on for a second. And I put the phone down, just like, because I knew there's no reason he would have ever called me except for that.
George was #1 candidate.
We were like, if we can get him, then the search stops there. That's the guy we want.
I hung up the phone. I was like, yeah. I just started fucking yelling. And my mother comes like, what's wrong? And I'm like, there's nothing wrong, Mom. You don't even know what just happened to me.
He came down for an audition, and they liked what he was doing, and it was kind of a bit difficult because he was in another band, and that's always kind of a tough situation.
How are they going to feel about us asking their singer to join?
Rob Barrett was living with me at the time, too, so he's kind of right there in the mix of it all. George is like, yeah, Cannibal asked me to join, and I told him I'd do it.
I knew I was going to do it. The second that he said, hey, this is Alex from Cannibal Corpse, I knew I was doing it. Bam.
I look at it like he left one killer band to join another killer band that maybe gave him a little more opportunity.
We ended up getting Jason Avery from Eulogy.
I was walking down the street in Eborn, I ran into Grinder, and he told me that he's singing for Cannibal now. And then a block up the road, I ran into Lee Harrison, and he told me George quit. So I was like, hey, I'll do it, you know.
Just kind of fell in his lap.
We did a lot of touring, and we built it right back up. So ultimately, it did, you know, it's like whatever, but we still get the, whoa, what's up with George? How, you friends with George? Whoa, it's been like 15 years now.
Monstrosity was just really good, straight-ahead Florida death metal. Some of the best at the time to come out.
There's old Lee Lavender, Mark Van Erp, Jason Goebel, me about 1,000 pounds later, and John Rubin. Imperial Doom. It's the first album I ever did.
George had kind of been recruited from a band called Corpse Grinder in Maryland.
I did 2 demos with Corpse Grinder. I did their 1993 demo after I'd already been in Monstrosity. Their singer left and I went home and I did a demo with them.
I'm the one who gave him the name Corpse Grinder, who like, because we were like, let's get that guy from Corpse Grinder. Where's Corpse Grinder? Let's get him down here. Where's this Corpse Grinder guy?
He was really the perfect fit because we're getting faster, we're getting heavier, and he's just, you know, he can sing 1,000,000 words a minute.
I called up Chris and told him the situation.
He just said, you know, I think you know, it's best for us. We're gonna we want to go into a different direction. I was like, yeah, no problem. That's fine by me.
He's like, oh, that's okay. I was gonna quit anyway. We didn't argue or anything when we were on the phone, you know, talking it over.
I got off the phone and I swear to God, I was like, whew. I was like, all right, man, I feel so fucking relieved I'm out of that mess.
And their tour had just done kick-ass, you know, he just had a great tour with 6 Feet, so it didn't seem to bother him that much at all to leave.
It all happened for a reason, and it was all a path that someone put me on as far as I'm concerned in my whole spiritual journey as far as this whole thing goes.
First backlash was from the label. Brian Slagle just thought we were the biggest idiots in the world.
They wouldn't tell me, because they knew that I was going to be furious.
We were in the studio, and it was a disaster when we told Slagle and Faley. I mean, they were ready to fucking kill us.
After it was all done and everything was all finished, and they said, well, Chris is out of the band. And I go, well, wait a minute, what do you mean he's out of the band?
I think the label was a bit nervous and maybe not particularly happy with our decision at first.
My God, you're just like, where's the knife? Let me just, you know, I need to cut my wrist. I need to, you know, go turn on the car and shut the garage door.
They were a little skeptical, I think.
The last thing you want to do at a point when you're at a peak is to change singers, because that's a huge change.
It's a big shock, right? I mean, for them, they're thinking, how the hell are we going to do this? We got a record half in the can, and we've kicked out our singer, the face of the band. But the band was saying, look, we don't give a crap anymore. We don't care if we sell 1 record. That's how strongly they felt.
What am I going to say? I mean, it's their career. I mean, there's nothing, you can't force somebody to do something.
People were concerned about it outside of our band, but in the band we weren't worried at all because we knew it was going to be good because we got the guy that we thought was the best man for the job.
Honestly, it never was a question of George being able to sing the songs, ever. I mean, right. It was a question of could the band go on without the face of Chris Barnes and Cannibal Corpse.
Losing a singer as important as Chris Barnes is life-threatening to a band.
When I heard that Barnes left the band, I think I about almost fell over off the bar stool. I think Roll told me, what the fuck?
I didn't think they'd be able to replace him. He was like their sound. That was Cannibal Corpse.
He deserves a lot of credit for getting the Cannibal Corpse image out there and starting a new niche, really, vocally and lyrically.
I think everybody thought, well, he's the singer, he's the leader. What are we going to do? What are we going to be like?
Would they now just become another brutal, fast band that was faceless in the crowd of thousands?
A vocalist is an important part of the band, but he's 20% of the band in our case.
We're the same musicians, the guy that wrote all the music since day one.
We're not going to allow our fate to be decided by changing a vocalist. No way, you know. We worked way too hard on the music to let a vocalist make or break it.
People always questioned that decision. People always looked at it, but it's turned out that it was the right decision for both entities.
Chris has gone on to have his own successful band, and that's great.
I'm feeling good where I'm at right now, but I like where I came from too. I'm very proud of everything I did. I stand by it, you know, and it's really held the test of time as far as good death metal goes. I think that it'll continue to be thought of as one of the purest moments in death metal history, those first records I was involved with.
We had to take a little bit of a break and the lyrics had to be rewritten.
So we basically were starting from scratch lyrically.
We had to, you know, kind of take a crash course to be able to figure out how to write lyrics and, you know, keep up with the standard that he'd already set.
We can still write some gory, heavy lyrics. You know, we knew we had it in us because we felt those same kind of things like that he was feeling, Barnes, writing lyrics. We just didn't write them.
It actually gave me an appreciation of what Chris did when he was in the band a little bit more. We were just like, you know, I don't think we appreciated it as much because we didn't have to do it. Once we actually had to do it ourselves, we were like, oh, you know, he actually did come up with some really cool stuff, like the lyric patterns for Stripped, Raped, and Strangled. They're still some of the best stuff that we had.
And that's what we were really trying to shoot for when we got George in the band, is, you know, is to make the patterns, you know, be as best as they can. So it's almost not going to matter what you're saying.
The lyrics are just like the icing on the cake, so to speak. The icing on the evil cake.
I came down here and we just started, you know, Alex, well, here's what I got for this song and that song, and I would listen to the song, and then, you know, we'd go over it and we'd go and practice it, and then we'd go in the studio.
We wanted to get him down as soon as possible, get him in the studio, and get these songs done.
I was anticipating that record like the coming of Christ.
Divided by Vermin was the first song we started tracking. And I remember, you know, the first part of that song, the infamous part is the boom, 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 the scream. That's the first thing people ever heard of me. You know, okay, who's this fucking dude replacing, you know, the singer of Cannibal Corpse? I remember I was doing that scream and it was just sound like shit. And, you know, I was probably nervous, you know, as arrogant as I was, like, you know, call anybody else, I'm the man, I can do it. You know, I have to admit, I was just like, you know, I remember it wasn't working out. The scream was just not sounding good, and I'll never forget, I said, give me a second, I can take a piss. So I'm in the bathroom, and this is Hollywood as it gets, but I looked in the mirror and I said, this is your fucking shot, blah, blah. I cussed at myself, looked at myself like, fucking better do this, and I went back out. And when I went back out, I took a drink of water and said, okay, let's go. Boom, 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 boom. The scream that's on the record is the one after I basically cussed myself in the mirror. Like, don't blow this, you know, you can do this, why are you even worried about it? Just go out and sing how you sing. Near the end of Vile's completion, I would do some hours with them, and then I did Millennium with Monstrosity.
He would like do a Cannibal song in one side of the studio, and then he'd go over in the other one and do Monstrosity songs.
We'd written the songs with him in mind vocally, and it was, you know, he knew the parts the best.
I was just kind of joining the band and learning the songs, and while they were in the studio doing that record.
He didn't do the high screams that George did at the time. He was more of just all lows, whereas like with George, you know, we kind of perfected that whole, you know, going from low screams to the high screams, you know, and having that.
You were always going to have certain fans that were out there that were going to be Cannibal fans no matter what, whoever was in the front. But you also had fans that were there that were Chris Barnes fans and already liked the 6 Feet Under project, and they were going to go Chris's way.
It's tough, you know, because it's all subjective. Somebody's always going to like one of them better than the other because they're two different people with two different sounds.
Chris was good with the crowd. I'll give him credit there. He could hold him, captivate him.
You guys ready for some more?
He commands the stage. He commands your attention. He commands your respect.
All he'd have to do is just put his arm up and everybody would go crazy.
And you really got the crowd going.
He'd keep the mic down in front of his face, and he'd lean down so his hair was in front of his face. And I just thought that was so scary. Like, what was going on under that hair?
When you could actually see his face, it was just like the whites of his eyes, like he had his eyes rolled back. And it looked really cool. It was eerie looking.
Chris had more of a mystique about him.
A lot of people were just wondering what he was like as a person because he didn't really necessarily hang out too much with the fans. Like, he was kind of an enigma. He would disappear and off into the darkness kind of guy, you know? He had this mystique about him that everybody was like obsessed with. Like, man, what's up with Chris? He's like crazy.
I think George is more of a everyman kind of singer. I think the kids feel a connection with him.
To actually be able to step into a situation like that and take hold of it and be in command of it is fucking amazing.
I give George every credit in the world for having to go in there and walking up on that stage and winning over those fans, one fan at a time if he had to.
A lot of people would have fucking folded because people in the audience being like, Chris Barnes and no. But he stepped in and took position of what he needed to do, and he's still fucking doing it.
And there's still tons of people who still love what Chris did.
It's definitely gone through phases as far as how people reacted to that and how they perceive it now.
Some people are like, I like both you, you know, just different. Yeah, that's true. It sure is, you know, and that's their right.
People should be happy that Cannibal's here and 6 Feet Under's here, and you got, instead of one great group, you have two bands to listen to.
Hey man, you're still better than Barnes.
They didn't bitch about George for very long because if you see the guy on stage and fuck, he'll kick the shit out of you with his hair if you don't like him, so fuck you.
When Vile hit the Billboard Top 200, and it was our only album that ever did that.
Which was unheard of for death metal.
I think that helped quell some of the concern.
As soon as I heard George singing over this stuff, it just made sense to me. I said, wow, this is fucking perfect.
God damn, that guy is totally right for that band.
You'll go on stage and all of a sudden this beast comes out.
He's just brutal. Has the ridiculous high screams, the guy just owns it.
When he's singing, it isn't like he's faking it. It's a very vicious attack upon you.
He wants to crush everybody every night.
I would be scared to death to jump on stage to stage dive at a Cannibal show because it looks like George would just pick you up and break you over his legs.
You gotta go out and you gotta punch him in the fucking mouth.
Verbally punching you in the face, every lyric he says, and George does that beyond belief.
It just makes you be like, yeah, there's George. He's just going, man.
George is one of my favorite death metal vocalists because he's got a super scary voice and you can hear what he's saying.
George enunciates better than a lot of death metal vocalists.
There's a lot of the guys, they're just kind of moving their tongue as they're doing.
And you'll never see George cough the mic. He always keeps Suzanne on the mic.
And George sings like that, and he's like, wow, I can't believe that guy really sings that low. Well, yeah, he does.
When he belts out one of his long screams, he's told me sometimes it'll just hurt his head.
As soon as that scream is done, I just get these insane fucking headaches, man. I mean, I suffer for them long screams.
It's pretty clear when you see him perform that he's putting forth 100% effort.
amazing. He's definitely the best death metal singer there is.
He definitely took them to that next level they needed to be.
They became even more brutal, which I thought was impossible.
Maybe in the spring of '97, Rob had been becoming increasingly agitated about certain things in the band.
When we got him in the band, he's a great guitar player, great guy, good friend of ours, but we were still on, I think, a little bit of a musical difference in a sense. He was more into this thrash thing where we were definitely full on death metal.
He kind of wanted Paul to play differently because he was used to playing with different drummers, the guys he played with Malevolent and Solstice, and he was feeling a little bit limited, I think, at that time.
He wanted me to be more of like a Pete Sandoval and this hyper drummer, and I wasn't, and I'm not, and I'm who I am.
I just had to have the patience to be able to learn how to adapt.
He contributed a lot in Malevolent Creation. He had his own band going, Solstice, where he's the singer, he's the songwriter, and I can understand it being probably a little bit of a difficult thing.
I wanted to contribute more, and I kind of realized that the music was going in more of a technical direction. I mean, I like technical stuff, but I just felt that maybe my stuff wasn't really going to be received as well.
Had a little argument about some stuff, and he said, well, I'm going to quit.
I was just a little frustrated, and I didn't really know how to react to it, so I just stepped out.
When Rob quit, we tried out a few people.
This guy, that guy, and then got Pat.
Pat was in the band Nevermore.
Basically, Nevermore started out as a four-piece, and we definitely wanted to have another guitar player in the band.
I sent him a tape up, and I got a call back, so I flew up there and tried out.
He's a really cool cat, and he ended up being in the band because of that. You know, I spent like 2 weeks showing him some of the Nevermore songs.
I went up there, played with those guys for a couple years.
We did Politics of Ecstasy and In Memory at the same time. He played on both of those, and that was it.
They weren't quite as heavy as they are now. You know, they were just a new band finding their way or whatever. You could tell Pat wasn't happy.
It just didn't work out. I wanted to do something different, and they knew it.
We kind of all knew that he was way more into like a death metal thing.
Then I got an opportunity to go jam with Monstrosity.
He came out within a couple weeks. We did this Vader Broken Hope U.S. tour.
After the tour was done, I flew back to L.A.
But it didn't look like he was going to actually join the band. He was still living in L.A.
Kind of undecided about packing up my life in L.A. and moving out from Monstrosity just because of finances, you know. But then I got a call from Cannibal.
And we knew that if Pat could hack playing their stuff, he would probably be able to do ours as well, because in general, especially back then, a lot of their music was quite a bit more challenging technically than ours.
Shit was hard. I mean, there's very technical stuff.
Our sound man, Paul Babikian, had told us about Pat before too.
There's another guy out in LA that I met. His name's Howie Simon. He's from Buffalo, and he knows all the Cannibal guys, and he was plugging me along too, I guess.
He was like, man, you guys should call him. You know, and a few other people were giving us hints towards Pat too.
I guess they got tired of hearing my name come up from different people that they knew.
We got Pat to come down.
Came out and hung out and jammed for like a week straight.
We still were trying out this other guy too.
That was the only time where we actually auditioned guitar players.
So I'm hanging out, learning all these songs, I'm jamming with them, they're not telling me what's going on. You know, I'm like, do I have this gig or, you know, what the fuck? You know what I mean? What's going on?
I didn't really know it at the time, just his level of playing and his knowledge of theory and everything. I'm asking him if he can play a power chord, and here he is. He's beyond theory. He's got his own theory.
I still think to this day that he's the best guitarist we've ever had. The guy is like exceptional.
Technically proficient, he plays with feeling. Just, okay, he's in.
Rob Barrett came home from Chile saying, yeah, I'm done, dude, I'm done. Oh yeah, who are they gonna get? Oh, they're talking about getting Pat. Great, you know.
They got kind of pissed off when I joined. You know, I'm pretty sure that, you know, he's well written by now.
Of course, Monstrosity has been like a breeding ground for like all the other bands.
George was in Monstrosity, Pat was in Monstrosity. I actually played in Monstrosity for a while too.
If you play in Monstrosity and do real well, you can go play with somebody else.
When he got the gig in Cannibal Corpse, I was like, hey, that guy's gonna be one happy dude.
Pat is not a guy who seems very enthusiastic about anything. And so we were like, well, does he care?
Yeah, I was
cool, you know, I guess.
We think he's excited, you know, and we talked to him about that. He's like, no, I really want to do this. You know, I guess he just didn't know how to express it, but he was like, yeah, I really want to jam with you guys, yeah.
I mean, it would have really sucked if I didn't get the gig, you know, and I got to go back out to LA and pick up a paintbrush again and start painting houses.
Chuck Schildiner from Death toured with Nevermore when Pat was in the band, and when Pat joined Cannibal, I remember Chuck saying, wow, that's really cool, because I know Pat was a huge fan of theirs, because he talked about them a lot on the Nevermore tour, the Nevermore and Death tour.
I totally believe to this day that, you know, it's something that he's always wanted, and his dream came true.
His guitar playing style and the style of writing has been a perfect fit. It was a very strong addition to our band to get him in there. Pat started writing right off the bat.
I contributed one song for the Gallery Suicide album.
When Pat first joined the band, this was the facility we were at.
Basically a storage unit, kind of.
This is it. We called it Frank's, I guess. Frank was the owner, still is the owner, actually. And it's basically a sign company that he has here, and this is his warehouse.
So we just moved in there where it was like way off the road, and we could make all the noise we wanted to.
I remember the drums, we had them pretty much set like right here. We had a lot of room to work with. This was a very spacious facility for us. This is where Gallery of Suicide was created.
We did 5 albums with Scott.
When we did the first CD with him, it was just like, wow, this is the guy we're going to be working with forever in our eyes. Like, Morrison will be the studio, Scott Burns will be the guy.
I think I stopped doing bands probably in about '96.
Scott kind of quit the music business in disgust.
Because I was young and having fun, I ended up getting pigeonholed, which was fine as just the death metal guy. But in the end, there was fewer and fewer good bands. Perhaps the scene had peaked and was on its way down.
I don't think he ever wanted to step foot in a recording studio of any kind ever again.
You know, I just really wasn't into it as much as I used to be. It was harder and harder to make a living at it. You know, I never took points. I never really charged the bands a lot of money. You know, I just thought it was time for a change, and I didn't know how long I'd be gone, but I've been gone forever.
Consider him a great friend of the band, not just someone we worked with.
He worked harder than anybody. He'd be sitting back there. I still can see him in my head. Just his hands on his forehead.
He was like really dedicated. He wanted the band to sound the best that it could.
When we would record, he lived about an hour away, so he would just crash at Morrisound or crash at our apartment. Like, he would just like crawl in the closet, lay down with a shirt over his head and go to sleep.
He brought out the best in this band. You know, he was the guy who got us started, really. Scott Burns means a lot to this band.
And he's a 6th member of the band, the way we considered it.
Made the band what it was.
Scott's awesome, man. He's funny. He's he's fun to work with. He knew my voice. Sometimes I felt better than I did.
So many people would come to record with him, but he would like not take credit. I don't know why they're coming to me. What did I do? What did I do?
I don't think I'd have a career if it wasn't for the fact that I had great bands. Otherwise, I'd just be some engineer doing demos for anybody's bands that no one's heard of. So I consider myself truly lucky that I got to be a part of it.
We miss him, that's for sure. You know, he's one of our favorite people ever.
After Scott was no longer producing our CDs, of course, we still used Morrisound for the next CD after Scott, and Jim Morris ended up being the producer for that.
They'd done enough work in this building before that this is kind of like a second apartment, second house for them. They were really comfortable.
That's it, you're right. It was such a natural transition. Coming in and knowing you, it was just like, yeah, we're working with Jim now.
Even though Pat hadn't been around here, I had known him a little, and I really was a fan of his playing.
Every time I go in the studio or work with a different producer or engineer or whatever, you always learn something.
We definitely had a great time working with Jim as well, and we were very happy with the result.
I remember sitting here, and no one was here but me and George, and he's doing the vocals, and I have a lyric sheet, and I get the lyric sheet, and I hadn't looked at it yet, and he starts going through the song.
He was just reading, I think, Dismembered Molester.
And I started to laugh. So I started kind of like sliding down behind the console, realizing I'm gonna be laughing out loud in a second. And this dude's gonna come in and twist my head off. And so I kind of hid down here like this, and he's, how was that? And I'm like, that was really good, you know what I mean? And little Scott Burns right there, that was really good. And so he comes running in the door, I think, and he saw me laughing. I don't take this seriously enough. I guess I should feel the same kind of hate and vitriol that's in the lyrics. Right. And yet I'm laughing my ass off.
He's like, dude, I don't believe you're fucking singing this with a straight face.
I don't care if they're serious about it in real life or not. You know, I don't care if they're actually they actually believe that that's something to do, or if they're joking, or if they have a sense of humor, or they're kind of laughing when they're writing lyrics, or they're just dead serious when they're writing lyrics. I don't care about that. I want to know that it means something, that it feels like serious to me.
They're serious, but they're not serious like we're going to go out and do these things, or we're condoning that these things happen.
I think the fans get that we definitely don't want people doing anything ever that we've described in our songs, like ever. We did Eaten Back to Life, Butchered at Birth, Tomb of the Mutilated, The Bleeding, Vile, and Gallery of Suicide here at Morristown. We still have a great relationship with the people here. We just figured, man, we can't spend our whole career at the same studio. It's time to try something different.
That's when we started going to El Paso, you know, or Tornillo, actually, outside of El Paso to, you know, to do the next 3 CDs.
Yeah, we moved to Florida to record at Morristown, and then we start recording in El Paso. So I guess it would make sense to move to El Paso, but we didn't.
Pat had already worked out at Sonic Ranch when he was in Nevermore, and Pat was telling us about this place.
There's this place out in Texas that's really, really cool if you guys ever wanted to try something different.
And then we got to see a brochure, and we see the swimming pool and all this stuff, and I was like, let's give it a try. It looks pretty cool. And it was. It's a great place to record. I love it.
When we first went to El Paso, we recorded with Colin Richardson for Bloodthirst. He's a weird scientist of production.
He's very experimental.
Most producers just set up a kit, set up some amps, and then start recording. He worked on drum sounds for at least 5, maybe 7 days before we even got tracking.
He definitely had a great idea of what he wanted to get.
A focused guy, I mean, really knew what he was doing to get sounds, to make you sound the best.
He'd be standing up like kind of playing air guitar, you know, I'm singing or whatever, and he's just like, all right, yeah, let's do it again. And he's so into it, he's just jamming out to the band.
Obviously, his end result turns out amazing, I think, in whatever he does. He's made some of the best sounding albums.
Bloodthirst is still one of my favorite albums.
I think Bloodthirst is the sickest fucking record. Did I say Bloodthirst? Dude, Bloodthirst is amazing. One, because of Colin Richardson, who is remarkable at making heavy shit even heavier than it is.
Colin was supposed to do Gore Obsessed.
We were going to use him, and he backed out of the project, I think it was about a month before, which kind of left us a little bit in limbo in that respect, where, okay, now we're scrambling because we're supposed to be in the studio in a month or whatever, and our producer is not, you know, going to be there.
We needed a producer. And I had worked with Neil Kernan before with Nevermore.
Him and Neil actually had a really good working relationship. He produced Politics and In Memory.
Did the Dahmer for Macabre, turned out amazing, so we were like, yeah, why not?
He worked with a lot of fucking killer bands, you know. He worked on Unleashed in the East, which is like the greatest live album ever.
We ended up doing Gore Obsessed and The Wretched Spawn with Neil Kernan.
Those were great sessions.
Working with Neil is also great. Love the guy, you know, it's so much fun to hang out with.
He's a very zen kind of guy, you know. He's like very laid back, and he gets like the best work out of you. I don't know how he does it. He's just very intense in the studio.
He's also, in a way, kind of like Jim Morris in that he's an old school, super professional, killer engineer.
Neil just was nonstop, and an awesome worker. I mean, really on the same wavelength of our humor.
All right.
Yeah, man.
He's got a really good sense of humor, and we had a great time working with Neil.
You can joke a lot more and screw around in the studio.
For anybody out there who thinks death metal sucks, see how that sucks.
Kind of like in the middle of writing the album Gore Obsessed. We had this opportunity to get this big room really cheap. So we moved out of Frank's place into this place. We were only here for a couple of months, but it was right in the middle of summertime.
And it's actually a storage facility, like a people storage, but they had, you know, they had some rooms set up to rent to bands.
Yeah, everybody practiced there. You know, Morbid, we practiced there.
Nocturnus a long time ago used to rehearse there. Eulogy, Diabolic, Unholy Ghost.
It's fucking weird. It's like a mall of death metal.
I remember going there, and for me, that was like getting to see the Eiffel Tower in Paris. It was like, wow, I get to go to U-Store in Tampa. This is where all these great bands that I love practice.
Let me tell you something. This is fucking Florida. In the summertime down here, it's fucking hot as fucking balls, you know? This place for AC, barely any.
That place was so fucking hot.
It was hot as a son of a bitch.
And then it's got an ant problem. Bunch of fucking ants on the back wall. Just ants everywhere, right? Just ants. Kill the fucking ants.
And then there were rats in there too.
Rats the size of big fucking house. I mean, big fucking rats.
One of our buddies had an amp in there, and his amp ended up getting eaten by rats.
There was like droppings by his amp, like little pieces of stuff. I'm like, what the fuck is that?
I don't know what it was about the upholstery on his amp being more tasty to rats than anybody else's stuff.
They literally chewed the fuck out of his amp.
I mean, you'd swear that somebody like put peanut butter or something on it.
My storage place where I used to live and practice, I'd have cockroaches crawling over my body while I slept at night. It was so friggin' scary, but it was all from metal.
Between the rats and the extreme heat, we decided to, you know, try and find another place. Practice room that we're in now, we call that place Audio Lab because it's attached to a studio called Audio Lab.
Our writing process has changed over the years.
There's been cases where we have collaborated on stuff, where I'll come up with a riff and then Alex will come up with something on the spot.
On The Wretched Spawn, Severed Head Stoning, that's one that's a collaboration between me and Pat that was fairly spontaneous.
Every CD, there's always going to be those 1 or 2 songs that we do put on there. That was kind of like a collaborative effort.
Gore Obsessed, we had a song called Savage Butchery, which me and Jack kind of came up with on the fly at the practice room.
And most of the time, though, we work individually on our own song. Like if I come up with a riff or come up with half a song, it's usually my job to go ahead and finish it out and come up with the other half.
If you look at the songs that Jack contributed to the band, they make a little more sense than some of mine do, or maybe Pat's.
Jack is more straightforward in how he writes.
And I think that was a good thing because, you know, it just gives it that diversity.
Most imaginative writer, his laid-back style it's awe-inspiring.
He's got his own style, more blues-based. He definitely gave Cannibal part of their unique sound.
Spine Splitter, Perverse Suffering, you know, they're very good examples. Those are like my 2 favorite songs that Jack wrote.
When you listen to a song like on Wretched Spawn, Decency Defied, it's a simple song. I mean, there's not a lot of riffing going on. It's just a basic idea, but it's the way it was put together and the way it just comes out as a song. It's a very popular song for us.
Some of the songs he wrote were really super catchy.
I think that helped out and give a balance of not everything being so fast and so technical.
We only like to use the technique to make a song heavy. We don't want to use the technique to say, hey, look what we can do.
His heavier songs still had melody to them.
I don't really remember Jack as a soloist. He was more just kind of a riff dude.
Definitely 100% the best guitarist I've ever played with in a band.
Jack is very fast with his right hand. Very fast up and down picking, like just blazing speed.
He kind of had the Kerry King, Jeff Henneman approach to soloing.
The last 2 tours we did a tour in Europe and a tour in the States for The Wretched Spawn. Jack was just more by himself than ever before.
For a few years, we've been noticing Jack getting a little bit more and more like withdrawn from the rest of us. He didn't really hang out with us after the shows anymore. Like the rest of us would hang out in the back lounge and be listening to music and stuff, and Jack would just kind of go in his bunk.
Nobody talked to him, nobody saw him. Obviously, he was up on stage doing his job and all that, but for the most part, during the day, he was gone. He would go in his bunk. I mean, it was just no interaction with the guy at all.
On stage, he was definitely becoming less and less enthusiastic. You can see it in some of the shows.
It just felt like something more so was wrong, like, you know, he didn't want to be here. Jack had his side band going adrift at this time already, and nobody cares. Anybody can do what they want. Obviously, Cannibal has got to come first kind of a thing, and do anything you want around that, that's fine.
We had a bunch of shows booked in Mexico, and his band Adrift had ended up booking a show in LA that was supposed to be a showcase for some label people, and that was going to conflict with the shows we had in Mexico.
The promoter writes me, you know, from Mexico going, yeah, what's going on? I see Jack's other band is going to be out and playing a show out in LA when we're supposed to be in Mexico.
I emailed Jack about it, actually. I'm like, dude, what's up? Hey, check this out. I showed him the article that I'd found online. I said, we were going to Mexico at that time. And then he wrote me back. He's like, man, yeah, I think it might be time for me to leave, man. I just want to try something different.
He didn't want to go to Mexico. He wanted to do his adrift thing and go there, so he opted to quit at that point right there.
It wasn't even like adrift being the reason I quit. It was just moving on.
Didn't come as a shock that he quit. I think we all saw it coming.
Given how Jack felt at that time, he probably made the right decision to leave.
You're unhappy with your situation, well, it's better, I think, for everybody. You know, it was better for him to leave, and it was better for us to get a guy that, you know, that wants to kind of be here.
Looking back, it was kind of dumb, but it wasn't for disliking the music, it wasn't for disliking the guys, because I see them all the time. Still like a brotherhood.
I mean, said we'd left them with no animosity, we parted ways like that, you know, so it wasn't any bad blood. So when we do see him, it's just like, you know, it's almost like you know, like he's still part of the band. It's just, hey, Jack, what's up? You know, just joke around like, you know, like I just saw him on tour last week or, you know, whatever.
6 months after I quit, Deicide had problems with their 2 guitar players, so I wasn't really doing too much. So it was a no-brainer to just jump on tour with them, and eventually joined the band, do an album and another album.
To show his coolness, when you go from Cannibal into something like Deicide, and he's made Deicide better, you know, they're the best they've ever been, I think.
You know, people think it's like, oh, fuck death metal, I quit. That was what they thought I did. But, you know, then to join Deicide, they're like, dude, I thought you said you hated death metal. And I'm like, no, I never said that. Just said I had to get away.
So we're about 3 weeks out from having shows. What do we do?
We're not canceling anything. You know, we need another guitar player.
I think Alex just called to ask if I knew anybody or even if I could fill in for the show at that time. But I think I was going on tour or something, so it was impossible. They need somebody, like, real quick.
He told me about Jeremy Turner. He said, yeah, I think this might be the guy. You know, I toured with him. He's a really cool guy. You know, he played in Origin, and their music's very challenging.
You know, Eric, of course, we trust his opinion, you know, on anything, like, especially guitar playing wise.
I think Eric had enough faith in me, or else he wouldn't have told Alex.
Sometimes referrals can be dangerous. You know what I mean? You refer somebody and then they do you wrong and then you look like a jackass. But he's one guy I knew that would do me right.
We flew Jeremy down. I think he was mostly staying with George at that time, and then Pat was teaching him all the songs.
I was excited, but extremely nervous. I'd never met these guys, and I'm gonna practice with them, live with one of them, and tour with them.
Man, Jeremy got it together in like 3 weeks. He got a whole 18-song set down to the point where I never heard anything like a real mistake.
Wow. Well, good, because they were there. They were definitely there.
We went and did 5 shows in Mexico.
You know, went to South America and Brazil.
And then we had a whole U.S. tour, I think, after that.
Some of the people in the U.S. would joke, oh yeah, they got him because he looks like Jack on steroids.
We had him for the remainder of shows we had for the Wretched Spawn. He played Walkin' with us that year.
I think there was 43,000 people when we played. That was probably the most nervous I've ever been in my life. How I played 90 shows in 6 months on 3 continents. It was pretty much a whirlwind.
He did a bunch of tours for us and really helped us out in a tight spot.
And at the time, I was hopefully working into becoming a permanent member.
Well, yeah, of course, Jeremy was in consideration. You know, now we've toured with the guy, we know him.
He lives out in Kansas, you know, he has a wife, a house out there. He was really rooted in Kansas, and we like to have the whole band live in the same part of the world.
To uproot him and move him down here, you know, but it just wouldn't have been right.
I was willing to do it. But it would have taken a lot of work.
We were really considering getting him until Rob showed interest in coming back.
We played at the Masquerade in Tampa, and I know Rob was at the show.
And I was actually going to talk to them guys about me possibly rejoining the band then, but it just didn't seem like the appropriate time.
He got in touch with Pat first, and then he called me, and he let me know how he felt. He was like, I'd like to give it another try.
I don't want to make the same mistake again. And like, you know, just say, I'm gonna leave instead of trying to work things out.
I was like, well, I just want to make sure the things that you were dissatisfied with the first time are not there anymore.
You know, if there's a problem, I want to be able to sit down and work it out.
It took a couple months of really figuring out what we want to do.
He's like, well, I want to show you guys that I can bring something to the table and, you know, make the band even better by being there, you know, and he said he really loved the newer music that we've been doing.
You know, it did seem like a natural thing to do to get him back in the band.
It wasn't too late, fortunately. I was able to come back, but it was like 8 years after.
He was in, he was out, and then he was back in.
Rob, of course, was in Cannibal when I got in. Then he left and went to Malevolent, and he'd already been in Malevolent before he was in Cannibal. He went back to Malevolent, then he came back into Cannibal.
And I told him like 3 years earlier, you should have never left. But you're hard-headed. You should have just stayed.
We told Jeremy what we were going to do and everything, and it wasn't an easy decision, because he had done a great job and we'd become friends with him.
I was kind of disappointed. I mean, it ended up working out better. I'm glad that Rob's back. I think it's awesome.
I remember when we first finally played with him for the first time again, it almost seemed like he never left in a way.
It's always been about the music for him, and he has to feel that music, and coming back into Cannibal's giving him that opportunity to rejuvenate himself, but in that process, rejuvenate the band.
They know that I'm 100% into the band, and I'm not coming back to the band just as a gig.
I think he's a true Cannibal boy. He's one of the guys from the originating days, so it's good that he's back in it.
Kill marked the return of Rob Barrett.
They brought Eric Rutan in to do the production with them.
And just knowing that, man, I was following up Neil Kernan and Colin Richardson and Jim Morris and Scott Burns, you know, all engineers that I certainly respect. And these guys are giving me a chance to prove what I got on another level.
This record has to be the most brutal album. You know, that's his mentality. We got to make this album blow last album away. It's got to be way more brutal. I want you to be sicker than you ever have been.
Eric kicked their butt on a lot of stuff, and they pushed themselves from a writing aspect.
Cannibal Corpse is one of the classic, legendary bands of the whole genre. So, of course, looking at that, I'm just thinking, man, I can't fuck up.
Rutan is one of our own because he plays in a death metal band.
That does give him a different perspective on what we're capable of, you know, like how far he can push us before it's unreasonable.
You gotta try to work them as hard as humanly possible without breaking them down. So you have to learn everybody's individual limits.
It's pure attack with him. He's a pure fucking, come on.
I'm trying to cash in on making sure that I fulfill the drill sergeant title.
I think he pushed us harder as far as our playing.
But the one thing with those guys, they all want the best, you know, so it makes it easy to just go and just keep going.
I think any guitar player who records with Eric is in for some pretty intense scrutiny.
Sitting down tracking with him, you know, it's just like doing it over and over and over and over again.
I'm a tuning freak. I hear intonation and inconsistencies with picks and all kinds of shit.
Maybe he was hearing things that I wasn't hearing. That's why we hired him.
Believe me, sometimes I wish I didn't. My hearing, it's very acute.
You'll have, 250 BPM blast beats going on and crazy bass lines and just everything going on at once. He'll stop tape and say, do it again, it was out of tune. Everybody will look around like, what? And then sure enough, you solo up the guitars, it was out of tune.
If there's like one line I'd probably say more than anything is do it again.
He knows what the hell is going on and he knows what sounds brutal. And there's no way that first and foremost he would not try to make everything as brutal as possible.
The sound of it is very aggressive and natural sounding. It doesn't sound overproduced.
We had a lot of time to really experiment and get the tones everybody wanted. For me to get the performance that I was looking for.
It took us like a couple months to get done with Kill. But when it was finally done, you know, it was worth all those, 12-hour plus days.
Those guys give me such a huge opportunity. It really changed a lot for me as a producer.
He's like now the new guy, the new Tampa guy that everyone's going to record because he's, doing an amazing job and he's come into his own.
I got a lot of bands interested in working with me from that record just because of the sound.
It's just amazing that some 20 years after the band comes out, they put out a record that week of release, almost their top-selling debut ever.
When it came out and hit the Billboard, I must say I was quite pleased.
Every time they put out a record or they do a tour, they find some sort of way to keep themselves current and to reinvent a little bit.
They never betrayed themselves as a band, as a musician.
They never sold out.
Never sold out.
And that's because we stuck to our guns and we still do what we do.
We don't do anything for any other ulterior motive or exterior reason, you know, oh, we want to make more money, so we have to write this way. No, we're pleasing ourselves, and that's the most important thing, and we've stuck true with those thoughts and that way of thinking since day one.
We set out to be a gory death metal band. That's what we still are after 20 years.
It takes a really unique kind of discipline to do that, to really stick to a vision and not stray from it at all. You know, although your lives could be changing and you have family and kids at home and, you know, all this domesticity that could be shifting in your personal life, and they just have kept this complete tunnel vision approach to their art.
They still write songs with the same degree of complexity, intelligence, everything they put into their first records, they still do now. They're not just going through the motions.
Whatever comes out of us, and it'll always be Cannibal Corpse. We have our own sound.
There's something about their music and their themes is timeless.
Cannibal Corpse has those parts that are just like devastating and they make you want to murder motherfuckers. But it's something catchy. They've done 10 records and you can still remember something from the second record and like, wow, that part is so fucking epic. And you're like, holy shit, here it comes again, you know, and they have, on every record, they have an element of that where it's like remembering.
You always remember the vocal line. The drum hook is always good. And you always remember the riff.
The musicianship is super amazing, scary dexterity.
Five fingers make a fist, so it's, you know, it's very pounding, punishing metal when they're together.
That's really ultimately what you have to have as a band. You have to have 5 people that all work together as a good unit.
The lineup they got now, man, is a very strong lineup.
Both Pat and Rob are masters of rhythm guitar, and they sound really tight together. The picking is locked in. The guitar sound is very similar.
Rob's like a real solid, real tight rhythm player. He gets a really good guitar sound.
I've known about Rob's playing since Malevolent Solstice, and the guy just kills it.
He was always ahead of his time in terms of the precision. Rob was like a more refined, kind of precise Hetfield kind of vibe, you know?
More aggressive.
If you listen to any record he's played on, it always has crushing rhythm guitar sound.
Rob, rhythm fist, you know what I mean? A rhythm player, you can't get better than that.
All the different...
Always locked in with the drums.
Rob's the riff meister from hell. He's never been like a soloist guy.
He's not really into soloing and being flamboyant.
Malcolm Young instead of Angus, you know. I'm the one in the back just holding the rhythm down.
Really grounded and knows good tone.
He's like the sound guru in my opinion. He knows exactly what sounds good as well.
I'm not like a trained musician like Pat or Alex. I'm pretty much just a self-taught guitar player.
Rob's got a really weird picking style. His hand looks all weird, and he's... Watch him when he plays next time.
I think it's unconventional because a lot of people comment on the way that I hold the pick is kind of strange. Like, some guys have called me banana thumb.
You know, like Randy Rosa pick, like, you know, he had a crazy thing like that. Rob's got the banana finger hanging out.
I kind of scrape the strings instead of pick down on them.
His playing really accentuates what Pat does.
Pat, just like Rob, is an amazing guitar player, really tight and really melodic.
Pat's furious. He's just...
Pat, punishing guitar player.
Man, great player.
I don't think people realize the complexity of kind of guitarist, you know, Pat is.
He's so technically proficient and so meticulous with what he plays. It's off the chart.
Most guitar players have a weakness of one or the other, whether it be their picking hand or their fret hand.
Pat's one of those guys, he's kind of a complete package.
Great riffs, great soloing. Man, first-class stuff. I don't think he had one weakness. He can play it all, really.
I mostly set my sound for rhythm, for this. You know, for the rhythm sound, I don't really set it for leads.
A lot of his rhythm parts are as difficult as a solo might be in another band.
His rhythms kind of match his leads. It's just a million notes a minute that are awesome, but if you wanted to try and play it, it'd be impossible.
You talk to any guitar player on the street, they can't play that shit, you know? Fuck that.
When he plays riffs, I just sit there and go, how the heck did you even think of that riff, let alone be able to play it?
Some people might think that he wrote it, you know, just, hey, look, I can play it. No. Pat is just good, and he writes stuff. It just happens to be technical. It's like, goddamn, this is fucking crazy, man. What were you thinking? He's, I don't know, I just wrote it. It sounded cool when I was writing it.
Just, you know, fucking around with ideas like that and like might manifest into something, you know, or it might not.
He really is a vital part of the Cannibal sound. His songs are awesome, and we definitely need his songs on our CDs.
So that's basically my sound there, my sound.
It's scary sometimes because I'm watching his new riffs and I'm like, I gotta learn that. You know, like, Jesus, you're killing me, man.
I know where every note's supposed. I know exactly where it's supposed to be. You know, to me, learning someone else's shit's harder.
All the really hard songs for me are always songs that Pat wrote.
There's a lot of tough ones, but if I had to pick one, it would be Frantic Disembowelment.
Frantic Disembowelment.
Frantic Disembowelment.
Frantic Disembowelment.
That's a really crazy song. I haven't actually learned it all the way through yet.
That motherfucker took me 5 days to learn at 2 hours at a time of just playing that song.
I think I've written harder songs.
Pat's a motherfucker.
Any of the guitar players I work with that make me play stuff where I'm, you know, at least temporarily cursing their name because I have to work on this shit. You know, I'm like, my God, I've been doing this for hours and I'm still playing it like crap, you know. In the long run, it does pay off. Traditional bass playing, you've got your chord that's being played for a couple measures. You can play some notes based around that. With death metal, you've got these weird atonal lines, and you pretty much have to follow them as a unison, or you're creating even more dissonance if you go outside of that.
Most of the bass players could never play the riffs note for note, so they would cheat, half-time it or whatever, or use a pick. And I shouldn't say cheating, but in other words, he was one of the first ones that tried to chop with the guitars.
It's not easy stuff to play bass to, and there was no rule book to it, and I've kind of had to write my own rule book as I went along.
You'd be hard-pressed to find any bass players that can play along with the riffs that these types of guitarists play.
Alex always was really keen on playing the bass with his fingers, never like playing with a pick.
I like to hear the individuality of each musician, and you get that more fingerstyle.
And he has this weird kind of finger technique that is very impressive that his mind can work that fast, because mine cannot.
I think Alex came up with something where he could do a pattern of 4 with 3 fingers.
The 3 that are striking the string are these. This one isn't striking the string, at least it shouldn't be. If it's bumping into it, that's a problem. So it's like this. I want it to sound like straight 16th notes, like.
He had a lot of bass flair into extreme music, a lot of cool little fills and bass runs, and you could usually hear his bass like throughout the recording.
Actually quite jazzy, you know, in some ways with what he does.
If it wasn't for Alex, I think a lot of the modern, newer bass players in some of these bands wouldn't be playing the way they do.
It's nice to have that, especially when you have kids younger that are looking up to a band and there's a bass player in the band that's featured to some degree, and he's an important component and not just this invisible guy, which bass players often are in rock music.
He's just a super solid player, just very inspiring to watch.
He's a bass player's bass player. That guy's a sicko.
As a bass player, I look at him like, nah, I fucking...
What can you say? He is the greatest bass player in death metal.
I do it fairly well just because we've been doing it so long.
Alex is one of the best bass players out there.
Probably the best bass player I've played with.
He's definitely the best death metal bass player.
Hands down.
I would put him in one of the top 5 bass players in heavy metal of all time.
He could play anything he wants to play.
I always considered Alex like the Steve Harris of death metal.
If you told him that, he would flip out and say no.
I don't deserve that for sure. I'm probably the one who makes the most noise in the studio to get himself turned up loud.
He's almost too humble for his own good. Absolutely zero ego.
I really do think it's not just me being modest. I think that's got a lot to do with it. If people can hear you, they're going to notice what you're playing.
He doesn't take accolades very well.
He's the best there is, and that's the way it is. So accept it, Alex.
They're not just a technically good band in the studio. They're awesome to watch live. You know, that's what I like about them.
We pretty much just find our spot in the front of our monitor where we could hear everything good. Just kind of lace them up and buckle in and start kicking that neck.
They play those songs and they nail them.
I don't think I've ever seen a bad Cannibal Corpse show.
They come at you and you get bowled over.
They seem like they go on stage and they just want to rape everyone in the crowd.
When I go on stage, I feel like somebody's fucking with my family or something. I'm like in this serious mode, like, don't touch me, don't talk to me. I don't want to talk right now. All right. I'm in my mode, you know, concentrating on the metal that I must deliver.
They're so fucking serious on stage, and that's what you want.
Man. Yeah.
And you wouldn't want it any other way. They look like 5 murderers. They look like 5 serial killers. That, like, shouldn't the police get them? I mean, they're right here. No, they wouldn't get them here.
We're a more stationary band on stage. You know, a lot of bands move around and jump around, do whatever they do.
Most guys move around on stage because they're scared and they have to go to the bathroom. But Cannibal Corpse is not scared. I never really went to the bathroom.
Hey, I already went to the bathroom.
That front line of Cannibal right now, they hang their heads and their hair's to the floor. It's just one big, huge line of hair that just is always in motion.
You don't even see their faces, so you don't even know what they look like. They just get up there and it's just a sea of hair and it's just riffing.
That's ridiculous. All that hair.
I just think it looks more brutal when you have 4 guys in the front just banging their heads, and then, you know, they're still playing and I'm looking like I'm gonna kill you. That's really what fits our music.
I love when he threatens dudes in the crowd. Yeah. He's like, I swear to God, come down there, rip your dick off, man.
I'm going to find you and cut your heart out myself.
Get to see a giant man with a giant neck scream at you and circle a headbang for an hour and a half. What more do you want?
I don't bang my head like that because I'm trying to put on a show. I want to show people how much I can headbang. It's because that's what I feel.
I can't believe his head has stayed on his shoulders all these years.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting for it to pop off.
That's why he's got a big neck.
If you look at George's face while he's headbanging, his face actually comes off of his skull.
He's got muscles here that most of us don't really have. I can actually see those 2 muscles going like that.
That's one fucking big neck.
And you might hear him referred to as the neck with lips.
Every time you see him, I feel like his head's getting smaller and his neck's getting bigger.
Over the years, it's gotten bigger because of headbanging. From here to there, it's probably thicker than my fucking head.
His headbang is not matched by any other's headbang.
Ouch. I suck at that.
We're up there, our bodies are taking beatings for years, you know? I mean, those guys are whipping their head around. How do they not have major neck problems? They could, you know, or they could develop them in the future.
We played through a lot of pain, we all have.
There's definitely consequences for 20 years of self-induced whiplash.
We put our bodies on the line for this. I guarantee you, Alex and myself will have neck problems when this is all over. Rob probably too.
Yeah, sometimes I'll pinch a nerve and then for a couple days it takes me a while to get it back into the proper position. It hurts. The metal that I deliver. Chiropractor would probably think I got in a train wreck or something.
Been to some chiropractors and stuff like that, and they always ask me, have you been in a car accident? And I said, no, nothing serious.
So here I am, stretching the spine.
Just trying to undo some of the years of headbanging stress. I feel like I'm like an inch taller when I get off of this thing.
If I go for, say, 2 months and not play anything, well, of course, when I go back, I'm not going to be up to par. And the older I get, the harder it is to kind of get back into it.
I don't know how long I'll be able to play death metal live on stage. Eventually, you know, something's going to break down on me.
I can go up there and I can play and I can walk away going, you know, I feel pretty good. I'm not dying. I don't feel like I'm about to keel over.
Paul looks like he's about to die when he's playing drums. That's great. I think he does this great Robert De Niro impression when he's playing, because he's got that same kind of face that Robert De Niro can get, and that's really cool.
His tongue would like stick out here a little bit.
Yeah, I hear that a lot too. You know, I get ridiculed a bunch by people, so, you know, I'll have to deal with them later. They know who they are.
These guys have been doing it a long time. There's no waning energy there. They can give any teenage or 20-year-old band a run for their money and probably school them every time.
Class is about to be in session.
Time to teach a lesson.
A brutal show, and like the pits are insane. It's definitely something you have to see at least once.
When you come see Cannibal Corpse, it's like you're signing an agreement to see them every time they ever come through. They make lifers out of their fans, man, and we're two examples right here.
They fucking whoop so much ass.
They're the best fucking band ever.
They're one of the sickest bands on the planet right now. Cannibal is definitely one of my favorite bands since birth. I have to admit, butchered at birth.
We love them, and we always will, and we'll travel there and here and wherever, hours and hours, miles and miles, and gas dollars later. We'll be front row.
I went to the Cannibal Corpse, and all I got was an awesome barrage of slamming tunes. I gotta go find my car.
Get him a fucking car!
Get him a corpse!
I love to see the fact that Cannibal is as big as they are, yet they still take the time to get out of their tour bus and go and talk to the fans.
You have to give that back. If you have an attitude like, oh yeah, well, you're under me, then you're gonna end up being under them before you know it.
Your fans are what keeps you around. Your fans are how you are a band. Without them, you're just a bunch of guys making music.
The music survives because of the fans, first and foremost, and that's what it is to me.
I've never seen them be anything but genuinely grateful and respectful to the people that come and listen to their music.
The very first show I came to, Corpse Grinder told me that if I didn't come to the next show, that he'd come to my house and kill me.
I want to see you banging your fucking head, or I'm gonna come out there and fucking bang it for you.
I know how much it means to people. That's why I think we put such a big effort into being accessible to the fans.
That's my idol.
I was almost speechless. I didn't know what to say at first, but I just came over here, and there's Alex, there's Pat, and then George walks over. It's like, whoa.
20 kids could mob them, and they're all asking for signatures, and they sit there and they sign every scrap of paper.
We usually like to get weapons that have been used in songs for them to sign. This is obviously hatchet to the head. I got Corpse Grinder to then kill me with it.
We've done butcher knives, pickaxes,
hammers,
hatchets, and hammers. What other band's gonna sign a weapon for you?
If you hang out after the show, you can personally get to know your audience.
They smile and shake our hand like we're not doing them a favor by showing up. It's a mutual respect thing. We might be in the front row headbanging to their songs, but they appreciate it just as much as we appreciate them being on the stage for us.
They seem as happy to see us as we are to see them.
Your headbanging impression from me.
Okay, let's check it out.
And then there's...
Awesome, there you go. Yeah, see, he's got it down.
Alex will just hold a bass clinic after every show. He'll be in front of the bus and he's got a crowd of kids around him.
He talks to them eye to eye, and he really listens to what they say.
Look at him now. Look at it. Pan over to him.
I've been a fan of yours my whole life, man. Oh, thank you. I hope you like this. Oh, it was fucking awesome.
He'll just talk to kids till like 3 or 4 in the morning.
It kills him that he has to get on the bus and go. He just wants to sit out and hang out and talk to everybody.
What's cool about Cannibal Corpse is their fan base is still a young fan base.
Cannibal, no matter what, doesn't just have that old crowd that, you know, oh yeah, I saw you back and, you know, 93, yeah. Oh, I haven't bought nothing since then. Their fans seem to still keep buying the records and enjoying the music they're creating.
My parents, they're into metal. You know, like my dad introduced me to bands like Pantera when I was little.
My mom did listen to Cannibal Corpse a couple of times.
There's like 2-3 generations right there, or decades of fans, and that's big.
It's a fans band, and that makes a big difference for them, and I think that's a lot of their longevity.
Cannibal Corpse just seems to have a driving force behind them. They keep delivering, they're constantly touring, they're constantly giving the fans more, and that's what they want. That's why they keep coming back for more, because they give it to them.
And they never disappoint. They never disappoint.
We've gotten albums out continually. We've been touring basically non-stop since the early 90s.
I think that's why we're where we are today.
Keep supporting death fucking metal!
As much as I would like to sell 5 million records, that would be great, you know? We never needed to be mainstream. We never needed those things to help us do what we're doing. We needed our fans that have stuck with us from the fucking beginning and through member changes and all that.
Fans out there are smarter than people might think. They hold on to a good thing once they find good people playing it. That devotion to the style of music, death metal, that Cannibal Corpse plays and helped invent is very true to their heart and comes through in a very honest way.
They're the epitome of death.
If it wasn't for them, death metal wouldn't be where it is now.
They are the roots of fucking death metal, okay? The old school death metal, the real shit.
And the fans always see that. They see through the bullshit.
True fans know real music. And at the end of the day, that's what it's really about, the music.
Never followed any trends. We played what we love playing.
Never compromised, did it on our own terms.
We wrote what we wanted to write. We played where we wanted to play, and we did what we wanted to do.
They never cared when they fell in or out as the flavor of the month, when death metal was cool or death metal wasn't cool. They just went about their business. They kept doing what they wanted to do.
There was even a time when death metal was considered dead.
If you were a metal band in like the mid-90s, you were in trouble.
The bigger bands kept going, but yeah, a lot of the local bands broke up. There wasn't the crowds for them, and they weren't getting the opportunities to tour.
Literally chopped the head off of about half of the death metal scene.
Being able to survive during that climate is a testament to the band itself.
That train kept rolling, you know what I mean? Like, they were one of the few that kept the battle going, and they didn't just win that battle. They got the crusade going.
We definitely were the ones, I think, that carried the torch as far as like not giving up.
Just their talent and commitment to staying with it and not, you know, when things get rough, just quit and say, no, we can't do it anymore. They stuck with it.
They've had the constant label support the whole time.
My whole philosophy with running this label is that I want to have bands have careers. And that, to me, is the most rewarding and the most fun. So when you go into this, when you sign a band, I mean, theoretically, you want to develop them over the course of time so that they have a nice career.
This is what I wanted to be my career. I took a shot and hit the target.
I think that band is at the forefront of probably the #1 death metal band in the world. This band has sold 1 million records plus in their career.
For a death metal band, the first one to do that. I mean, that to me is pioneer.
You look at the body of work, perhaps you can say they are the best of all.
And they kind of, by what they did, defined what this thing is.
When the word death metal is spoken, I think that's the first band to come to mind.
It doesn't matter who you talk to, really. They know the name Cannibal Corpse. They may not know the music, but they'll know the name.
They worked really hard to create the world that was Cannibal Corpse.
You know, the older you get, the more you look back and say, wow, holy shit. And I'm sure with these guys filming this DVD, it's like a holy shit.
It's just so cool to realize how long we've been doing this stuff.
You dream of it and you hope it happens, but you know, when it does finally happen, you think back and look back and you're like, wow, it's crazy that it did.
Some of the fondest memories of my life being with that band, for sure, coming from where we did and the whole story behind what made that band what it is today, and the longevity and the desire and The sheer gumption that we all had to make something from nothing.
If I actually stop and really think about it and try and look at it from the point of view that I had when I was 19, if you would have told me then that all this was going to happen, our band would be around for 20 years and that we'd do so well and get to play all over the world, never would have thought it was possible.
Back in the day, we're like, I'd like to do like an album and maybe tour around New York, maybe Pennsylvania.
Play some shows and hopefully some people will like our band and make a demo and buy it. Pipe dreams of, making a CD and going on the road.
20 years later, 54 countries later, 1 million albums later, here we are.
We got really lucky and we're really happy about it and we're really grateful to our fans, I can't believe it. I can't believe we made it,
Fucking A, God bless them, man. God bless their evil death metal bastard souls. It doesn't look like they're gonna stop making records anytime soon.
Who knows? Let's see what comes next. But we'll be there battling it.
It's kind of like a bang until we're dead kind of situation. We really have no plans on stopping.
I still love playing. I still love meeting all the people that we've met over the years. There's nothing like stepping on stage and just hearing the crowd. There's no feeling like that in the world. So as long as that feeling's there, then I'm here to stay.
If you edit something really stupid where I'm like doing stuff and then using the same like backwards forwards thing, do we get Final Cut on this thing?
I hope I make it on for like 3 seconds at least, Are you in charge of editing or are you just, really? 3 seconds, just give me 3 seconds, that's all I'm asking for.
My palm is, I don't know why I was thinking my shirt. I don't know why I don't know, is it the left or the right?
I don't know.
I hope it's the right because this motherfucker itches.
Versus now, I don't know if it's... Is that a burp?
Yes. Oh, I didn't know you had a microphone going.
Camera shy. That's me.
All right, cut.
Busy doing what you do. Yeah, how does it feel?
It's Cannibal Corpse.
Goodbye.
Who's Cannibal Corpse?
You ever heard of him?
That's the thing. I guess it's open for interpretation. Interpretation. What am I trying to say? Interpretation.
She's gonna make us look so skinny and pretty.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
First, I like to get in tune.
Ding, dong, dong, ding, ding.
I can't say that damn word. What's up with that?
Wrong way, low, back low, too high, ding, dong, dong, too low, ding, ding, dong, dong. So then we encountered the wild pack of dingoes. And then
We had to share bunks with each other and shit.
And then?
For like 6 weeks, me and Jack slept together. So that was exciting.
Tell me about some of the jokes you guys
No, I'm playing Warcraft, beat it.
But since I got these headphones, I'm probably shouting.
So yeah, you've seen everything, so leave.
There's a fly on the inside of my sunglasses.
I remember when I was recording Kill.
You couldn't do it. I mean...
What do you got in your mouth right now?
Some food. A piece of meat was stuck in my teeth.
All right, let's wrap it.
I have this one story. There was this time when we were doing a video shoot for our 20th anniversary DVD, and so the legend goes, I said, "See ya, I'm zugging. It's time for some World of Warcraft. Later."